Delilah couldn't remember how long it had been since she ran away from home. Ran away. Those were scary words. People run away from home when things are bad. Really bad. When it's impossible to keep living with those who are supposed to be your strong support. Your pillar. Your comfort. At first, she ran as fast as she could, until she felt a sharp pain in her right side, until she realized she simply couldn't catch her breath, until her vision started to darken. She ran like a rabbit fleeing from hounds. And then she slowed to a walk. She walked along the moonlit road, clutching her chest as if trying to calm her heart, not let it leap out of her chest. It was horribly cold. She realized that when she slowed down. The cold wasn't noticeable while running, but now the wind burned her overheated skin, crept under the fabric of her sweatshirt, seized her throat, preventing her from taking a breath. November turned out to be cold. Almost winter, except that the snow hadn't fallen yet. But there was already a scent of the first wet snow and the coming frosts in the air. Delilah hugged herself. She felt an overwhelming urge to cry, but there were no tears. They must have run out. There must be some limit. A person can't cry forever. She heard a sound behind her. A car was approaching. It was speeding. Delilah looked back. In the uneven moonlight, she made out Dominic's Jeep. She understood he saw her. Understood it with some sixth sense. A feeling she didn't have yesterday. If he found her, it would be the end. And Delilah knew that for sure. She would never see Polly, her daughter, again. Not just Polly. She wouldn't see the light of day again. Dominic promised that Delilah would end up in a mental institution, and he usually kept his promises, especially such ones. He might forget to bring flowers, saying he was too busy, asking what else she wanted from him. But this, no, he wouldn't forget this. Without understanding what she was doing, Delilah darted off the road, into the woods. She nearly twisted her ankle, stumbling over either a rock or a tree root. And she ran again, without choosing a path. No, she couldn't let Dominic find her. That would be certain death. Her lungs were burning again, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might stop forever. But it was better to die than to end up in a psychiatric hospital. It's just a shame that Polly would never know what happened to her mom. You can't tell such horrors to a 5-year-old child. Delilah kept running and running. She stumbled over a mound, fell to the ground, painfully hitting some stump. She groaned loudly but got up and, limping slightly, continued on her way. She didn't think about where she was running or what would happen. Anything was better than the fate her husband had in store for her. The forest thinned out. Delilah realized she was back on the road. This time it was a dirt road. How long had she been running? It seemed like there was no one behind her. Maybe Dominic either hadn't noticed her or was searching. Or perhaps he decided it wasn't worth looking for her, hoping Delilah would just crack her head open, disappear, lost in the dark labyrinths of the forest. One less problem for him. A perfect solution, really. A crazy woman ran away at night, got lost in the forest, and froze to death. But dying wasn't what Delilah wanted. She was sure the main thing was to wait for morning, and then she'd figure something out. The sun would rise, and the problems would dissipate like mist over a lake. Her head was spinning harder. After all, Delilah wasn't used to such physical exertion. She approached a tree, leaning her back against it. Her legs wouldn't hold her. Delilah slid to the ground, feeling her jeans immediately get soaked. She'd probably catch a cold. Although that wasn't her main problem right now. Even her documents were left at home. Everything was left at home, including her daughter, Polly. Lord, let her daughter forgive her mother. She would definitely take Polly back. She just needed to survive and figure out what to do next. Delilah couldn't feel her body. Maybe her soul decided to leave her. With consciousness, she realized she was falling onto her side. But there was nothing she could do about it. That's probably how people die. So, did Dominic win, Polly? Delilah whispered. "Forgive me, sweetheart, miss." Someone shook her shoulder. Delilah opened her eyes. Was she alive? Or had she died and ended up in the afterlife, with some guardian angel trying to bring her to her senses? But it wasn't him. Delilah recognized the man. Fortunately, not Dominic. The same nose with the bump, and his hair still long to his shoulders. He used to joke that when he kissed her, leaning over, they ended up like in a tent made of his hair. Delilah found it terribly funny. Once upon a time, it seemed like in another life. But that simply couldn't be. "Travis," Delilah whispered. "What?" The man moved away from her. "Where? How do you know me? You don't recognize me." Delilah raised her hands and touched his cheek. Maybe she had fallen asleep, and all of this was just a dream. How did he end up here, not far from their house with Dominic? Recognition flickered in his eyes. It flickered and immediately disappeared without a trace. "Let's go. Can you work?" He stood up and gently pulled her towards him. Delilah got to her feet. The man wrapped his arms firmly around her waist. Delilah recognized his touch immediately. Strong, yet tender. It wasn't easy to break free from his embrace. Long ago, she used to pretend to be offended or jealous, and he would hold her tightly, whispering that he loved only her, even with all her mischief and caprices. She used to pretend to want to break free, but deep down, she never did. And they both knew it. How long ago that was. Yes, I can. She, without realizing it, nuzzled her nose against his shoulder. "I can work. Travis, I thought you were dead." "We'll figure it out," he promised. "But for now, you need to warm up, and you need to see a doctor." Delilah nodded obediently. For some reason, she knew now, with him by her side, nothing bad could happen. 10 years earlier, Delilah always loved spending time with her grandfather. Her sisters Sarah and Alexis found it boring. They didn't understand why Delilah would sit in her grandfather's study for hours, reading books in silence, and sometimes sneakily watching as he flipped through catalogs, furrowing his thick gray brows. Mr. Gregory Gilbert dealt in antiques, buying, selling, auctions. That's how he made his fortune. The funds allowed his family to live comfortably and buy a nice house in an upscale neighborhood. Delilah didn't understand antiques, but the atmosphere in her grandfather's study enchanted her, calmed her, helped her gather her thoughts. She even did her homework here when she was in school. Her grandfather didn't mind. He even set up a separate desk for her by the window. That's where they would sit together. He with his catalogs, she with her textbooks and notebooks. Now, as she grew older, Delilah understood. Her grandfather dreamed of seeing his successor in her. He tried to involve her in his business, telling her about the treasures one could find at flea markets or in pawn shops. He even took her to auctions, explaining how they worked and how to properly sell and buy all sorts of rarities. But Delilah had no interest in pursuing antiques at all. She dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Gregory was disappointed, jokingly calling his granddaughter Dr. Fauna and repeating that she still had time to think it over and change her mind. But Delilah never did. After finishing school, she enrolled in veterinary school. Her mother, Sandra, was furious. She thought being a veterinarian was dirty and unsuitable for a girl. "How do you imagine this?" she would ask her daughter. "You come home to your husband and, 'Excuse me, you smell like horse dung or dog hair.' 'I won't smell like anything,' argued Delilah, finishing school. 'And anyway, maybe I'll find a husband who's also a veterinarian, like me.' Ha, what a nightmare." Sandra looked at Delilah in horror. "Do you want to live in filth and work in filth too? Honey, you need to choose a good, feminine profession." Think about these words. Sandra herself worked as a librarian. She worked, of course, for pleasure. She earned pennies, barely enough to buy her favorite perfume. She lived on the money earned by Gregory, her father, and Delilah's father, Adam, was a well-known psychiatrist in the city, heading a department at the local hospital. Sandra respected his work, although sometimes, during arguments, she'd call him a brainwasher. Adam would just laugh it off. He generally treated her with a condescending attitude, which annoyed Delilah a bit. But Dad believed that a woman owed nothing to anyone. Her only duty was to be beautiful, and Sandra handled that. Delilah admired her mom and considered her the most beautiful woman in the world. Maybe all girls think of their mothers that way. But Sandra truly was beautiful. Even as a mature woman, and after giving birth to 3 daughters, she maintained her youthful figure, and she took meticulous care of herself. Plus, she knew how to dress and loved it. Sarah and Alexis shared their mother's values, and they believed their father, thinking that a woman's main goal in life was to find a good, wealthy husband and live without knowing hardship. They both succeeded. Sarah graduated from the foreign languages faculty, met a foreigner, and moved to Jordan right after the wedding. Her spouse was well off and had some title. Sarah often boasted that her husband was 15th in line to the throne. Delilah didn't understand what was so special about it. After all, to become a queen, Sarah would have to get rid of at least 15 people. Alexis also married well. Her husband was found by her father. He introduced her to a young psychiatrist, stating that he would like to see him as his son-in-law. Alexis didn't argue with her father, and a year after they met, they had a lavish wedding. The son-in-law turned out to be quite promising, opening a private clinic and earning a good living. Only Delilah remained unattached. Sandra often grieved about it. Essentially, the youngest daughter was just wasting time and would soon become an old maid. "Delilah, you're already 23, her mother repeated. "So what?" The girl would ask out of habit, already knowing what would come next. "And after 25, Delilah, it's practically impossible to get married," Sandra would reply, pursing her lips, painted with red lipstick. Delilah didn't want to get married, although her mom occasionally tried to introduce her to someone she deemed suitable. But no one managed to win Delilah's heart. The girl wanted to study, and not at the local college, but at the University of Pennsylvania, home to the world's best veterinary academy. Delilah hoped that by returning home, she could establish her own veterinary clinic, where only those fanatically dedicated to their work would be employed. Just as dedicated as Delilah herself, who had adored animals since childhood. The only one who supported his granddaughter was Grandpa Gregory. He could even put his daughter in her place. "Sandra, that's enough." He would grimace when Sandra started demanding that Delilah get married soon. "She'll figure out how to live her life on her own. She'll figure it out." "Sure," Sandra would sigh. "Dad, you don't understand. It's my job to settle my daughter, to ensure she lacks nothing because someday we won't be around." "Right, Adam." Adam preferred not to get involved in these disputes and just nodded indifferently, staring into his plate. "We'll manage just fine without a husband for her future," Gregory would respond. Delilah believed she could provide for herself perfectly well. The main thing was to get an education. Fortunately, that evening, her mom and dad went to the theater, leaving Delilah alone with her grandfather, and she sat in his study with a book, preparing for tomorrow's exam, the last exam of the session, and then the defense of her diploma, and the trip to Pennsylvania, where she would try to get into the academy. Delilah was terribly nervous. What if she couldn't get in? It was a good thing Grandpa agreed to pay for her tickets, accommodation, and if it weren't for him. "Are you nervous?" Grandpa asked. Delilah looked up from her textbook lying on her lap and smiled dreadfully. "To be honest." "Well, that's good." Gregory nodded. "It would be worse if you weren't nervous. I wanted to talk to you, Delilah, about 2 important things." "May I?" "Is it something bad?" Delilah asked, feeling scared. No, not at all," he reassured her. Gregory took off his glasses and carefully placed them on the table. "Well, I have 2 pieces of news, a good one and a funny one. Which one should I start with? Let's start with the funny one. All right. Gregory chuckled. Your mom is planning to marry you off. Oh, I already know that. Delilah made a funny face. Grandpa, she's obsessed with that idea. Yeah, Sandra thinks she's living in the 19th century. Grandpa shook his head. She's married off too, and you're the only one left, my poor dear. But that's not the point. She's found you a groom and is determined to see it through. Yeah. How many times has this happened? Delilah giggled. Another son of her best friend. Right, yep, nodded Gregory. This time Sandra is more motivated than ever. The guy's name is Dominic. Apparently, he owns a chain of beauty salons. Inherited the business from his mother. That's all I know. Sandra frequents his salon and managed to befriend the owner. The owner stepped back from the business, and now this Dominic runs it all. And Sandra believes he's the best candidate. I advise you, dear, to get ready because they'll be nagging you with a teaspoon. Oh, Grandpa, I'm used to it, Delilah admitted. You know, I'll leave soon anyway. I doubt this Dominic will follow me to Pennsylvania. Well, it seems even Dominic's mother wants you two to get married. They want a girl from an intellectual family with a good inheritance. Gregory grimaced disdainfully. Thankfully, they're not asking for a pedigree. Yeah, and medals from exhibitions. I'm quite a catch. Delilah smiled. Litter box trained, shiny fur, and up-to-date vaccinations. Well, dear, my job is to warn you. Gregory put his glasses back on with a nervous gesture. I can't influence Sandra. Your grandmother spoiled her. All right, Grandpa, I'll stay away from Dominic. Delilah nodded. By the way, you don't like him, do you? I don't even know him. Gregory shrugged. I just don't like people who get everything handed to them. He hasn't achieved anything. Born to a pushy mother and enjoys her inheritance. So, Delilah, be careful. Of course, maybe you'll have love. Then I'll bless your marriage. Okay. I got it. Delilah looked at her grandfather affectionately. He's so caring. Alexis is right. Delilah is his favorite granddaughter. Sarah is jealous, saying they love the youngest more than the others. But Delilah knows the reason Gregory loves her isn't because she's the youngest, but because she wants to study. Because she has goals and dreams. And those dreams don't revolve around marriage and wealth. In her childhood, she used to bring home injured birds, sick cats, and dogs. Her mom would scold, not wanting to see them, demanding that Delilah take them to the nearest dumpster. But her grandpa, on the contrary, even set up a small animal rehabilitation center for her in the closet. Sandra threatened to throw away the cages, food bowls, and bedding. But Gregory wouldn't allow it, defending his granddaughter's hospital. He even helped her bathe the animals and feed the kittens with a dropper. Perhaps these memories were the best in Delilah's life. Like the time they sat on the floor together and fed newborn kittens she found in a box near the trash bins. They nursed all 5 of them, saved them, and found them good homes. Delilah wanted to keep at least one, but her mom was adamant. She said she didn't need the smell of cats, scratches, and nighttime noises. Second news. Gregory tapped his fingers on the table. Darling, I've lived many years. I often think that something bad could happen to me at any moment. What are you talking about, Grandpa? Are you sick? Delilah asked worriedly. No, not at all. Gregory waved his hands. I'm perfectly fine. Just old man's ailments, like everyone has. But at my age, anything can happen. Don't talk like that, his granddaughter interrupted. You'll live for a long, long time. Otherwise I'll be mad at you. Just listen to me. Gregory sadly looked at his granddaughter, and she fell silent. I have many things. For example, an art collection, a bank account, this house. But there's something I wanted to leave specifically for you because I know you'll handle it right, Grandpa. But talking about inheritance, Delilah said. Please, don't scare me. Okay, no. Still listen. Gregory pleaded. I have a collection of stamps. Not for sale. I've been collecting them for myself for many years. Nobody knows about them. There are some very valuable specimens, some of which exist in the world in only a few copies. I want this collection to go to you. What? Delilah couldn't believe it. Why? Because I want to. Gregory shrugged. Isn't that enough for you? All the paperwork is already done. The collection is yours. It's kept in the bank, in a vault that you'll have access to. You can keep the stamps and pass them on to your children. Over time, they'll only increase in value. You can sell them or put them to good use. This is your collection. Remember that. I don't want it. Delilah frowned. Grandpa, I don't want anything. I want to give it to you. And that's final. Gregory tried to put on a stern face but couldn't manage it. As always, he loved his youngest granddaughter too much, and his eyes gave it away. All right, sighed Delilah. Let them stay, and they'll be mine. Sort of, if that's what you want. I won't sell them, Grandpa. You can sell them yourself when you want. Delilah forgot about her conversation with her grandfather. Well, if Gregory felt better about it, then let the stamps be hers. The only thing that bothered her was the demand not to mention the collection to her parents or sisters. Delilah didn't understand why her grandfather was keeping his treasure a secret from his closest family members. Why did he only tell her about the collection? But she didn't argue. It must be how he wanted it. A couple of days later, after Delilah had passed her exam, her mom, Sandra, asked her to come to her room for a talk. Sandra always did that when she felt a conversation was of great importance. And Delilah realized it would be about Dominic. She wasn't wrong. Sit down. Sandra gestured to the armchair next to the table. She herself sat on the couch opposite. Delilah obediently sank into the chair. Delilah, I'm worried about your future. Sandra theatrically sighed. Your idea of going to Pennsylvania seems foolish to me, but I've already made up my mind, Delilah said firmly. Mom, it's my dream. Yes, 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 a dream. Sandra frowned. I had many dreams too until I realized that the most important thing is solid ground beneath your feet. Daughter, you need to get married. Mom, we've already talked about this. Delilah patiently objected. I haven't met anyone who suits me yet. Understand, but you're not doing anything about it. You're not going anywhere. Just sitting at home, said Sandra. There's this young man. If you marry him, I'll be calm about your future. Well, who is this guy then? Delilah pretended to be interested. Sandra brightened up, mistaking her daughter's feigned interest for genuine curiosity. Oh, darling, he's very nice, well off, intelligent, and, most importantly, educated. One moment. Sandra picked up her phone from the table and unlocked it. Here, take a look, daughter. Delilah saw a picture of a guy around 28 to 30, in a strict gray suit. Apparently, the photo was taken for some website. This Dominic was captured with a folder in his hands, his gaze expressing seriousness and composure. A young businessman who knew his business. Well, he's nice, Delilah said reservedly. He's handsome. Sandra corrected her daughter. Let's get to know each other. He's ideal. I'm telling you, he's family-oriented, has been looking for the right girl for a long time. But there are only idiots around him. You know, everyone's interested only in money. But I'm not interested in money at all. Mom, Delilah couldn't help but say. As soon as I see money, I tremble with horror. Don't be ridiculous. Sandra gave her younger daughter a stern look. Get to know him, Delilah. His mom told him about you. He's interested in meeting you. You're a perfect match. Dowry. Good pedigree. Mom, it's like you're arranging a marriage for a cat. Delilah barely stopped herself from hitting her forehead with her palm. What's wrong with that? Be more serious, daughter. Do you believe in marriages for love? Mom, didn't you marry Dad because you loved him? The girl asked, Surprised. Love can come later, said Sandra, over time. And when choosing a husband, I considered many factors. You know, as experience has shown, I was right. All my friends who got married because of passion and strong feelings later got divorced. And our marriage with your dad has lasted. We're living and prospering. Delilah felt a bit sorry for her father. I don't want to, she admitted. I'm not up for it. I'm leaving for school, Mom. It's not a given that you'll get in. Sandra crossed her arms. Just meet him once. Maybe tomorrow. You're free. I know, Mom. I actually wanted to focus on studying. Delilah frowned. I have my diploma exams coming up. Goodness. When will you start prioritizing properly, Delilah? Sandra wrinkled her nose slightly. Time is ticking. Soon enough, your chances of finding a husband will start decreasing rapidly. And forgive me. I love you. You're my daughter. But if I were you, Delilah, I wouldn't bank on my looks. Wait. Hold on. Mom, what's wrong with me? Delilah feigned surprise, although she knew her mother considered her plain. Sarah and Alexis, in her opinion, turned out to be beauties, taking after their mother. Tall, slender, with blonde hair and brown eyes. But Delilah was more like her grandfather. Tan, not very tall, with a long nose and a slight hump. When Delilah was little, her grandfather used to call her his little bard because of her skin color and dark, almost black, hair. Don't take offense, but be realistic, please. Sandra apparently decided not to dwell on her youngest daughter's appearance. Okay, Delilah promised. I'll go meet this Dominic. Just don't expect us to run off and get married right away. I'm doing this just to put your mind at ease. Great, honey. Sandra nodded. Just wear my dress, the blue one with forget-me-nots. And the shoes. Delilah decided to agree to all her mother's demands, just to be left in peace. The meeting was set. Delilah was to go to a restaurant called Blue Lagoon. Sandra treated her departure as if not just Delilah's fate, but her entire life depended on Dominic's decision. Sandra even did her daughter's makeup. She lined her eyes with black, applied thick mascara, and curled her curls. Now you look good. Sandra approved of Delilah's appearance, looking at her handiwork. You've been walking around looking like who knows what. Jeans, sneakers. What's that about, honey? At least it's comfortable. Delilah replied listlessly, examining herself in the mirror. Well, isn't this a sight? Delilah felt like she had aged 10 years. The dress was itching, and the shoes were rubbing her feet. Maybe high heels were invented to prevent a girl from running away from a date. With those spikes, it was impossible to work, let alone run. By 2 o'clock, Delilah arrived at the Blue Lagoon in a taxi. Dominic was already waiting for her at the entrance with a bouquet of red roses in hand. He handed the flowers to her and gallantly kissed her hand. Good afternoon. I've heard about you, he said. I have too. Delilah barely suppressed a laugh. Nice to meet you. To her surprise, Delilah found Dominic quite comfortable to be around. He talked a lot about his work and plans. It turned out that Dominic intended to open a whole chain of salons across the country. 3 categories: budget, mid-range, and luxury, he explained, to cover all target groups. No one has done anything like this before. Everyone focuses on just one niche. I'm casting a wider net. So, you'll be targeting everything at once? Delilah asked. Yeah, Dominic chuckled. Why not? You have to aim for something important, significant. Even if you don't achieve the goal, you'll still gain experience and grow. Right, well, overall, yes, I agree. Delilah nodded. By the end of the evening, Delilah suddenly felt that maybe her mother wasn't entirely wrong. Dominic was an interesting conversationalist. It felt like he wasn't just riding on what he inherited from his mother, but also wanted to achieve something on his own. However, he reacted skeptically to Delilah's plans. Why go somewhere? He asked. As far as I know, Your family has enough money to open a clinic. I just want to become a good specialist. Delilah confessed. The best. And to pass on that knowledge to others. And there's no better place than this academy in the whole world. I'm not sure. Dominic shrugged. It's far, and studying there is tough. But someone has to study. Delilah retorted. First red flag. Woman. Know your place. I just support traditional family values. I'm telling you right away. Dominic admitted. A family where the husband is the provider and the wife is the homemaker. But your mother achieved everything herself. Delilah reminded him. And she didn't just stay at home. As far as I know. Dominic smiled at her. She had no other choice. Our family has an interesting history. My father was a businessman. Everything was going well. My mother stayed at home, studying how to do makeup and nails out of boredom. She did it for herself, for her friends. And then my father started gambling. I mean, making big bets. He lost everything, even our apartment. He started drinking because of it. Died from cirrhosis a year later. Mom had nothing left but to start moving. And you know the result. First, she opened a small salon with her friend, then another one. And now we have our own chain. Well, Delilah looked at Dominic with sympathy. I really feel sorry for your dad. What can you do? He made his own choices. Dominic looked away. I don't like people with dependencies. They do it to themselves. Tough. Delilah remarked. Yeah, because I'm a realist. That's all. He shook his head. Let's not dwell on the sad stuff. Okay, it's such a nice day. They strolled around the city a little more. Delilah was limping slightly. Her shoes had terribly chafed her feet. But she was willing to endure it to spend time with Dominic, who was beginning to grow on her more and more. And then he offered to drive her home. They returned to the restaurant where Dominic's car was parked nearby. On the way, they listened to jazz and talked. The only thing Delilah didn't like about Dominic was his skepticism towards her plans and dreams. Apparently, the young man also believed that veterinary medicine wasn't a suitable occupation for women. But otherwise, she found him appealing. Who knows, maybe Sandra's maternal intuition wasn't wrong after all. Delilah's mother, upon seeing Dominic, lit up as if she had won several billion in the lottery. She offered Dominic coffee, and he agreed. Delilah's grandfather, Gregory, joined them. Together, they drank coffee and ate tiny pastries. Delilah glanced at her grandfather surreptitiously. He was completely calm, as if he hadn't recently told Delilah that Dominic was an unsuitable match for her. Finally, the guest bid everyone farewell and left. Sandra then demanded that Delilah help her wash the dishes. He's nice, she remarked, stacking plates in the sink. Come on, you dry. Mom, we have a dishwasher. Delilah reminded her. Let's do it by hand. Sandra gave her daughter a stern look. It's porcelain. I deliberately brought it out. Well, thank goodness you didn't bring out the silver from the reserves. Delilah quipped. Delilah stood next to her mother and draped a towel over her shoulder. Do you like him? Sandra glanced at her daughter. I can see you do. Hey, he's okay. Delilah replied indifferently. He's better than the ones before him. Just thinking about your Max, whom you recommended, gives me goosebumps. Those pimples of his, the mustache. Delilah, stop it. Sandra handed her daughter a plate. So, have you understood what I've been telling you? Family and children are what matters. You can leave your silly dreams in the past. Trust me, I've lived my life, raised 3 children, and I know what I'm talking about. Well, you see, you didn't raise one child well after all. Delilah kissed her mom on the cheek. Let's see what happens next. Delilah did indeed like Dominic. They started dating, albeit infrequently. Delilah was studying, and Dominic was working a lot. After a month, their relationship reached a new level. Dominic invited Delilah out of town to meet his mother, and that same night, they slept in the same bed. Dominic became the first man for Delilah. She hadn't warned him about this, and Dominic was slightly taken aback by the revelation. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked as they lay in each other's arms. "Why? Would you have changed your mind?" Delilah chuckled. "No. I just would have been more aware of the responsibility." He kissed her on the cheek. "By the way, my mom liked you, and I liked her." Delilah admitted to him. Dominic's mother, Andrea, turned out to be a pleasant woman. Delilah would have never thought she was facing a business shark. Soft-spoken and friendly, she fed her guest pie she baked herself, and kept hinting that she wouldn't mind becoming a grandmother. "So, you're not going back to your Pennsylvania, huh?" Dominic asked hopefully. "Oh, come on. Enough already," Delilah snapped. "Of course, I'm going." "So, what am I supposed to do?" Dominic withdrew slightly. "Wait for you for several years." "How do you imagine that?" "I'll come visit," Delilah promised. "Frequently. We have phones. We have the possibility to see each other every day through social media." "What's wrong with you?" "Not each other. Just a picture on the screen." Dominic raised his voice slightly. "Delilah, stop. Why do you need this? Are you trying to pick a fight right now?" She wondered. "Right now? This evening?" Sorry." He closed his eyes briefly, calming down. "I just don't want you to leave. You understand? I don't believe in long-distance love. Do you think I'll find someone else?" Delilah stroked his shoulder. "I won't even consider it. I'll be focusing on my studies. Or maybe I'll find someone." Dominic asked seriously, looking her straight in the eyes. "What?" Delilah couldn't believe her ears. Is he saying this now? After everything that happened between them? Never mind. He sat up, fluffed his pillow, and lay down with his back to her. "Good night." Delilah couldn't fall asleep for a long time. She wondered, maybe Dominic is right. And maybe Mom is right too. She seems to really love him. And he loves her. He even introduced her to his mother. And that's something, isn't it? And her. Why does she need this education at all? She already has one, but still. Delilah understood. Finishing the academy in Pennsylvania is her dream. A goal she has been striving for many years. She has read tons of textbooks and manuals and spent whole days preparing for entrance exams. At the same time, she was writing her thesis. She can't back down. Otherwise, she just won't forgive herself. In the morning, Dominic looked grim. He probably hadn't forgotten yesterday's conversation. As they drove home, he asked, "Have you decided anything about us? And what am I supposed to decide?" She answered quietly. "You know what I mean." He rolled his eyes. "About your academy. Of course, I can't make you choose between me or your studies. But I really want to. I really want to do that, Delilah." "I'll go," she replied, looking out the window. "Understand, I've dreamed about it my whole life. I won't back down, Delilah. I can't promise that I'll wait for you," he said calmly, as if they were discussing buying laundry detergent or going to the park for the weekend. "I understand." She nodded. The young couple didn't return to this conversation anymore. They met, spent time together, much to Sandra's delight. Delilah felt herself falling more and more in love. However, Dominic had his flaws. For example, he insisted that she wear dresses and heels around him. He believed that a woman should be feminine. "I work in the beauty industry. I like it when my girl looks good, so I can admire her. I can't stand jeans, sneakers, or any men's clothing on women," he would say, and Delilah agreed to this condition. She was even interested in changing herself for her beloved. However, her grandfather wasn't very pleased. He said that his granddaughter was changing for the worse. "Oh, Delilah," he sighed. "I thought you were a rock. And now you." Delilah just smiled in response. "It's okay. Grandpa will get used to it. He'll definitely get used to it. Especially when he sees how happy she is with Dominic. And why not make some changes if it pleases the person you love? Is it such a big sacrifice? At Dominic's suggestion, Delilah dyed her hair. He liked blondes, and Delilah had almost black locks. The girls lightened the strands around her face, and she didn't recognize herself in the mirror. She felt like her nose had become even bigger, more noticeable. But Dominic liked her new look, and Delilah decided to keep it as it was. Maybe then he'll understand how much she cares, and he'll realize that Delilah's studies will fly by like one day. The girls' departure was approaching. Sandra started talking more and more about how her daughter was making a mistake. No man will wait, the mother said. It's in their nature. A month without a woman, and they break free from the leash. Mom, if he loves me, he'll wait, Delilah argued. Love will fade as soon as you leave. Sandra frowned. Don't you understand that? And you won't find a better groom than Dominic. He hasn't proposed to me yet, so he's not my groom, and that's enough already. And you won't wait, daughter. Sandra sadly looked into the distance. And neither will I. Dominic didn't even come to see Delilah off. He sent a message wishing her luck. She understood that the wish wasn't entirely sincere, but she couldn't give up her goal. It seemed like only her grandfather was genuinely happy for her. Despite Delilah's objections, he transferred a substantial amount of money to her account. But despite all her efforts, Delilah didn't get into the academy. She didn't have enough points. Upon learning this, she burst into tears right on campus. Other students tried to comfort her. Don't worry, you can try again next year. Apollinaria, a tall Mexican girl, encouraged her. I'll be a year ahead of you, and will share all my notes. Yeah, exactly. Tori, a Japanese girl, gently touched Delilah's shoulder as she cried. Is it really a tragedy? No one died, did they? But Delilah realized she wouldn't try anymore. It was all in vain. So much effort wasted. So many hopes pinned on the academy, wanting to be the best. Who even said she was capable of that? She called Dominic and told him she failed. Well, come back. I'll be waiting, he said. On the plane, Delilah thought about her future. No, it's time to settle down, get married, have children, maybe start working at a veterinary clinic. It's time to grow up. Long overdue. She'd been away from home for almost a month. Her mother opened the door. Her eyes were red. Mom, hi. What happened? Delilah was scared. Have you been crying? Oh, honey, we didn't want to tell you, but your grandpa is not doing well, Sandra whispered. What? Delilah's legs gave out, and she collapsed heavily onto the hallway ottoman. What happened? It's his heart, Sandra sniffled. Dad found the best cardiologists. They're doing everything they can. Why didn't you tell me, Mom? Delilah exclaimed. If Grandpa had died, I wouldn't have known either. Is that it? I didn't want to scare you. And Dad didn't either. Sandra stroked her daughter's head like she was a child. We can visit him in the hospital tomorrow. I want to go today, Delilah said. Let's go right now. No, dear. Sandra took her daughter's hand. Tomorrow. Dad has a day off, and we'll all go together. Delilah never got the chance to meet with her grandfather. He passed away that same night. The doctors just shrugged their shoulders. It happens. They performed surgery. The patient seemed to be recovering, but a detached clot left him no chances. The following days were terrifying and chaotic. Sarah and Alexis came with their husbands. Grandpa's friends came too. Sandra didn't leave her room. Adam gave her a large dose of sedative. Delilah looked at her grandfather lying in the coffin and couldn't believe what was happening. How could this be? Grandpa never complained about his health, watched his diet. His blood pressure was like that of an astronaut. She didn't even get to say goodbye to him. Delilah knew she wouldn't be able to forgive herself for this. She shouldn't have gone to Pennsylvania. She shouldn't have. Fate was hinting at her not to. Dominic also came to support Delilah and her family. He held her hand, said the right words, but she felt like there was a distance between them now, a distance that wasn't there before. After the funeral, the whole family gathered in the living room. Sandra cried. Sarah and Alexis remained calm. Maybe, like Delilah, they just felt a strange emptiness inside. And Delilah was scared of this emptiness. As if now there was no Delilah at all. Nothing at all. Just an empty shell. She caught herself looking at the door. What if Grandpa walks in, sits in his favorite chair, puts on his glasses? He always wore them when he watched TV. He did it rarely, preferring to spend time alone in his study. Will Delilah never see him flipping through his endless catalogs again? Never talk to him, never hug him. Delilah's father, Adam, was comforting his wife by stroking her back. She cried and cried like a child. Delilah wanted to get up and sit next to her mother, but she had no strength. Mom, did Grandpa leave a will? Sarah suddenly asked. How can you even talk about this right now? Delilah exclaimed. Sarah just shrugged. What's wrong with asking, Delilah? We're all adults. And I'm not staying in town for long. I need to know, she replied. He did. Adam answered for his wife. We'll sort it out in the coming days, daughter. Everyone fell silent. Only Sandra cried louder and louder. And Delilah finally found the strength to get up. She went to her room. Lord, how could they think about inheritance at a time like this? She barely recognized her sisters. And Alexis. Delilah overheard Sarah and Alexis whispering about who and how much Grandpa could have left. Suddenly, Delilah felt terribly alone. In essence, she was truly close only to her grandfather. Her mom never understood her. Dad, Adam, was always preoccupied with work. The sisters, they were friends in childhood. Yes, but when Alexis and Sarah became married ladies, their communication dwindled. They sincerely marveled at her desire to attend the academy and start her own veterinary clinic. When they talked, the conversation quickly turned to whether Delilah was going to get married and to whom. In her room, the girl lay on the bed and curled up on the couch. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Delilah fell asleep. In the morning, waking up, the first thing she did was write to Dominic and suggest meeting. He agreed. The meeting was strange. Delilah felt ashamed for flying to Pennsylvania for her silly dream, for not appreciating Dominic and not thinking about his feelings. Dominic seemed oblivious to this. He talked about work, about a new branch of the beauty salon network he was planning to open. Towards the end of the date, when Dominic was driving her home in his car, he suddenly asked, "Are we still together, if you want?" The girl replied, "I do." Dominic nodded. "But no more academies." "Agreed," she said obediently. A few days later, Delilah learned that her grandfather had bequeathed almost all of his property to his daughter. Large sums were allocated to the granddaughters and son-in-law. Alexis and Sarah barely concealed their joy, which made Delilah feel uneasy. It seemed to her that she had lost her sisters, and her grandfather, and her dream. And all of this happened within the span of a month. After the will was announced, the notary handed Delilah an envelope intended only for her. Her sisters and parents looked at her surprised, wondering what secrets she was keeping from the family. Delilah tucked the envelope into her bag. She planned to open it at home. Inside the envelope was a password for a safe deposit box and a note. "Dear beloved granddaughter, I hope you will use my gift wisely. With love, your grandfather." Delilah held the note close to her heart and burst into tears. Even the sight of her grandfather's handwriting felt like a stab. She never told her mother about the contents of the envelope, and she refused to tell her sisters, not understanding why. Delilah then firmly decided that she would indeed marry Dominic. He was the perfect choice, and she seemed to love him, and he forgave her caprice with the move. "Delilah, it'll be better," her mother repeated, "and your grandfather would have been pleased." And Delilah seemed to resign herself to fate. Dominic. Just Dominic. And she also felt like she wanted to make her mother happy. as if she wanted to comfort her after her grandfather's death. If her marriage to Dominic made her mom happy, then so be it. Just 2 months later, Dominic proposed to Delilah, and she agreed to marry him. The momentous event happened at one of the city's finest restaurants. "Will you marry me?" he asked. The girl nodded and accepted the ring. Everyone in the restaurant started applauding. The waiter brought pink champagne. Dominic adjusted his jacket and sat back at the table, smiling with a satisfied, happy smile. "I was sure you'd say yes," he admitted. "No doubt," Delilah replied, thoughtfully examining the ring. She didn't know much about jewelry, but it seemed Dominic decided not to skimp. "Let's talk about the wedding." He looked at her with a serious, even business-like gaze, as if they were discussing not a wedding, but some business project. "Okay." She nodded. "I don't want to rush things. You know, we have an apartment. Bought it a long time ago, even before I met you. It's still without repairs. Mom suggested we move there." "Well," Delilah was surprised. "So, we have an apartment." "Looks like we do." Dominic nodded. "But we need to renovate it first. It's just bare walls there now. I suggest we finish the renovations first, and then have the wedding. How does that sound to you?" "Well, okay," Delilah replied. For some reason, she didn't care at all. After the renovation, sure, why not? Do brides usually act this way? Why was there no excitement, no tears of happiness? What was wrong with her? "Well then, it's settled." Dominic took a small sip of champagne. "My mom and I will choose a dress for you." "I can do it myself," Delilah objected. "Darling, your taste isn't exactly refined." Dominic affectionately smiled and looked at her as one would at a child trying to act like an adult. "What did you wear before me? Ha! Now you at least resemble a young lady. I want you to be the best. So, my mom and I will handle the dress. You'll like it, I promise. There will be important people at the wedding. Delilah, my partners. I want them to look at you and envy me, and to have no doubt that I have money. You understand? Is it so important to you?" Delilah asked with a smile. He was funny after all. But what did it matter what anyone thought? "Yes, it's important," Dominic replied seriously. "That's how the world works, Delilah. Your appearance matters, especially if you want to achieve something. And I do, very much." Okay, she agreed. "Let your mom choose the dress. I promise I'll try to impress your partners. But I wanted a modest, simple wedding." "No, that won't do." Dominic looked at her a bit annoyed. Did a man in love with a woman who just agreed to marry him should look like this? They might think I'm poor. "No, the wedding will be good. I'll take care of everything. My dear, nothing to worry about." And Delilah decided not to worry. It seemed to her that everything was happening as if not with her. The wedding, the dress. Dominic bought her a gym membership to work on her figure. Delilah wanted to be offended, but changed her mind. If it was important to him, then so be it. She would become the perfect picture that would truly impress his partners and friends. Days dragged on. Delilah wanted to get a job, but Dominic forbade her to do so. "Sweetheart, think about it yourself. Work. We need to prepare for the wedding. Then we'll go on a trip. Who's going to give you time off? I wanted to show you the world, and you prefer to heal other people's cats and dogs, don't you?" And Delilah had to agree. She obediently worked out at the gym, went shopping with her future mother-in-law, chose dresses, and browsed through catalogs of designer interiors and furniture. Soon it became clear that Dominic didn't like any of the options that Delilah preferred for their apartment. She preferred cozy interiors, soft furniture, natural wood, and muted tones. But Dominic considered all of that too old-fashioned and believed that the apartment should be minimalist. And again, Delilah agreed, just because she didn't cave away. The renovation was in full swing. Dominic regularly visited the apartment to make sure everything was progressing and that the workers weren't deceiving him. Meanwhile, Delilah stayed at home, still going to the gym and desperately longing for the wedding. Sandra was the only one happy about the situation. She believed she had successfully arranged her third daughter and fulfilled her maternal duty. One evening, while Delilah was at home watching a movie, Dominic called her. "Sweetheart, hey, I'm stuck at work. Could you go to the apartment? I need to check what they've done with the tiles in the bathroom. Take some photos and send them to me." "All right, well, you said I don't understand renovations. Remember?" Delilah chuckled. "You don't need to understand. Just take some photos, show me, and I'll figure it out." All right, she replied. "I'll go now." "Yeah, thanks." Waiting for the photos, Delilah quickly got ready and called a taxi. For some reason, her mood improved because of Dominic's call and request. Previously, he said Delilah would see the apartment only when it was fully ready. But she couldn't wait to see her future home right now. And here was her chance. The apartment was located in one of the new neighborhoods of the city, which was considered quite prestigious. Only successful people could afford to live here. The square footage cost significantly more than the city average. Sandra was thrilled that Delilah would be living here. But Delilah was a little apprehensive. She was used to living in a separate house that her grandfather had bought once. Delilah approached the right entrance and buzzed the intercom. The door opened. No one asked her who she was and why she had come. The workers were probably expecting Dominic, nothing surprising there. The hallway smelled of paint and chalk. Delilah liked this smell. It seemed to promise a fresh start. She even thought she should take up interior design herself. It must be terribly interesting, watching empty walls turn into a cozy home. The apartment was on the 5th floor. Delilah stepped out of the elevator and pushed the door. It opened easily. "Hello," she called out. "Hi," came the reply. A man walked out of the room dressed in a work jumpsuit. There was no shirt or t-shirt on him, and Delilah noticed his broad shoulders, chest covered in dark hair, and strong hands. She modestly looked away. A bride shouldn't stare at some builder. "After all, I'm here about the renovation," Delilah said. "Yeah, I know." The man crossed his arms over his chest. "First of all, how long am I supposed to wait for you? I've been here since morning. Secondly, excuse me, but what nonsense did they send? It's impossible to understand anything from this paper. Where did they find you?" "What? Excuse me." Delilah seemed to have misheard. "Are you talking to me, and is there anyone else here?" The man frowned. "Do you even understand what you're doing? Everyone's a designer these days, aren't they? And I have to deal with your fantasies. Here, look." He grabbed Delilah's hand and dragged her into the room. "Well, see." He pointed somewhere in the corner. "What did you write here?" "That we need this many rolls of wallpaper. But we need 1.5 times more. All this here. Where am I supposed to fit this conus?" "Sorry, I still don't understand you." Delilah was taken aback. "Anyway, figure out what to do first. Learn to count, and then I'll do everything as you want." "What's your name anyway?" Delilah asked. "Travis." The man let go of her hand and gallantly bowed his head. "I'm, of course, very glad to meet you. But you know, I had so much I wanted to tell you, and my name's Delilah. And I came to see the tiles. Did Dominic warn you?" Travis looked at Delilah first with disbelief, then with alarm. "So you are Delilah? Not Victoria?" "No, not Victoria. Not Victoria at all," the girl admitted. "Oh my God." Travis slapped his forehead. "And I've been waiting for the designer since morning. She promised to come. She wrote all this in her project. Where did you find her? And I thought you were her." "No, I'm not a designer." Delilah laughed. "Actually, I'm the owner of this apartment." "Well, the future owner." "Oh, fire me?" Travis asked seriously. "No, I won't fire you," she promised. "Will you tell the groom?" He squinted. "And I won't tell the groom either. On the contrary, it's great that you care about the job." Delilah smirked. You take your work seriously. And how else? Travis sighed. And sorry, but I haven't eaten anything since morning. Waiting for her. And she's still not coming. Let's go. I'll show you the tiles. Delilah took a photo of the tiles and sent it to Dominic. She didn't like the color. Delilah wanted a vibrant bathroom, but Dominic chose a beige, bland one. Nonetheless, Dominic was satisfied with the work done by the contractor. Oh, excuse me, please, Travis said when Delilah finished inspecting the bathroom. But I'm really cranky. And hungry too. How about I order some food for you? Delilah suggested. As compensation for the wrong choice of designer. Oh, come on. It's not necessary. He sighed. It's fine. I'm hungry too. Let's eat together. And I go, she insisted. Delilah ordered pizza. 30 minutes later, they were sitting at a makeshift table in the kitchen, illuminated by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, eating margarita. Delilah noticed that Travis had long hair tied in a ponytail. For some reason, she wondered if it hindered his work, but she didn't dare to ask. Thank you for not making a fuss, Travis said, finishing his second slice. I'm afraid I'll get fired, and I need the money. Yeah, money is needed by everyone, Delilah philosophically remarked. By the way, how's the pizza? Travis, it's good, he replied, but I'd prefer beef stroganoff with mashed potatoes. It's been ages since I've had proper food. Just those instant soups. Have to save up, you know. Dominic said the team gets paid well. Delilah was surprised. Well, it's good, but there are important expenses, Travis said, his mood slightly darkening, catching Delilah's attention. Anyway, thanks, landlady. I'll try even harder now to make you comfortable here. And about the design project with your fiancé, you need to talk to him. It's impossible to work with these scribbles. My guys are also cursing. Such designers should be kicked out of the profession. Delilah rode home in a great mood. Why? She didn't understand it herself. A couple of days later, she volunteered to visit the apartment again to check on the progress of the renovation. Dominic easily agreed to this. Delilah felt a bit awkward. She couldn't even admit to herself that she wanted to see Travis. But there was nothing wrong with that. He seemed like an interesting person. Why not have a little chat with him? Delilah spent the entire morning in the kitchen, boiling potatoes and cooking beef stroganoff, much to Sandra's surprise. Her mother knew that cooking wasn't Delilah's favorite activity. Moreover, such dishes were rarely cooked in the house. Sandra preferred a more refined cuisine. Delilah secretly set aside some mashed potatoes and beef stroganoff in a plastic container and put it in her bag. It would be too difficult to explain to her mother that Delilah decided to treat the contractor who was renovating her future apartment. And Delilah herself couldn't explain it either. Travis was alone. He opened the door and smiled. Oh, hi. Did you come to check on the work? Yeah, Delilah nodded. Where are the others? The others were here until 3. The thing is, your fiancé saved a bit, Travis replied vaguely. Come on in. Delilah took photos of the tiles and wallpaper again and sent them to her fiancé, Dominic. She felt awkward. Delilah desperately wanted to treat Travis, but she was afraid of what he might think of her. You mentioned yesterday that you'd like mashed potatoes and beef stroganoff, didn't you? She said, looking down. Here, take this. Well, let's say it's a reward for good work and a responsible approach. Travis looked at Delilah skeptically and blushed slightly. Is this for me? Yes, it's for you, she rambled. Well, thank you. He accepted the container with such reverence as if Delilah had given him a crown. Will you share the meal with me? Then, sure, I'll share. She nodded. They sat again in the kitchen, eating mashed potatoes from plastic plates that Travis had somehow found. And Delilah felt light again, as if recent events hadn't happened. The failure to get into the academy, her grandfather's death, the rushed engagement with Dominic. Delilah told Travis that she had graduated from veterinary school. "Oh, that's wonderful," exclaimed Travis. "I've always dreamt of it. I adore animals. We used to keep cows, horses, and goats in the village." "You're from the village?" "Yeah," he nodded, smiling at his memory. "We lived there with my mom and dad. My dad was handy, did everything himself. He even built a house for my mom, just the way she wanted. It was good there, and we were friendly with the neighbors. Not like here." "So, why did you move then?" Delilah asked, surprised. "I mean, if you liked living in the village so much." Travis's expression darkened slightly, a tiny vertical wrinkle appearing on his forehead. "Oh, it's a sad story. My dad died. Mom got sick. There was no one to take care of her in the village, so we had to sell everything and move. She has diabetes, a nasty one, expensive medication, constant tests. I'm doing my best to help out." "I'm really sorry to hear that." Delilah suddenly wanted to hug Travis, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. What would he think? He might assume that the apartment owner was trying to flirt with the handsome contractor. That must happen often. Travis was a good-looking guy. Delilah felt a pang of jealousy. He probably had many girlfriends with his looks. What a nightmare. She was practically married in 5 minutes. What was she even doing? What was she thinking? "Oh, forget about it." Travis pushed his plate away. "Thank you so much. It was delicious." "You're welcome," mumbled a flustered Delilah. "Well, I should go. I'll drop by again." "Okay, I'll be waiting," he replied awkwardly. Over the next few weeks, Delilah regularly visited Travis. Sometimes he worked with other contractors, sometimes alone. They developed an unspoken tradition of having lunch together. Delilah either brought something or they ordered pizza, just like on the first day they met. She caught herself thinking that moments spent with Travis were like a celebration for her. Somehow, she didn't feel the same with Dominic, even though he was practically her husband. Delilah found it fascinating to listen to Travis. Stories about life in the village, about horses and cows, stories about his beloved dog named Rick. And Delilah admired Travis. She admired him when he passionately talked about something and smiled. When he furrowed his brows, and a tiny wrinkle appeared between them. For some reason, Delilah wanted to smooth out that wrinkle, so it wouldn't be there anymore, never again. She understood it was temporary. The renovation would end. Dominic would become her official husband, and Delilah would never see Travis again or talk to him. And she dreaded that moment. A month later, she realized she had fallen in love. And what to do about it? Delilah didn't know. She thought it was just hormones. They say infatuation doesn't last long. She comforted herself that it would pass soon. Just a temporary confusion. Delilah thought about Travis day and night. Dominic seemed oblivious to it all. He worked, talked about the upcoming wedding, and that his mom had already decided where the celebration would take place. He called it an event, as if it were not a wedding but the opening of a new beauty salon. Dominic even picked out a hairstyle for Delilah and instructed her to dye her hair lighter shade. Delilah didn't want to. She was afraid of ruining her hair and loved her chestnut color. But she didn't argue. She just didn't care. Yet, she couldn't help but think about Travis. What if? No, it was impossible. Her mom would never forgive her. They would quarrel. Her sisters wouldn't understand. How could she trade Dominic, a young promising businessman, for some construction worker, a rural guy without education? And how could she explain that Travis had read more books than Dominic had watched movies? And talking to Travis was more interesting for Delilah. The renovation was almost finished. The mood of the future apartment owner was deteriorating more and more. Soon this strange time would end. The time when Delilah was still free and could easily come to visit Travis, to talk, laugh, eat pizza, and of course, admire him. And then lie in her room and think about the life they would never have. The life that seemed to Delilah the best. the most right. They would live in the village. Maybe they would start their own farm, where Delilah would work as a veterinarian. They would have children. Travis confessed once that he loved children very much and wanted at least 2. Delilah even came up with names for them. And why not dream? No one would ever know about it anyway. A girl, she would name her Melissa. And a boy, William. That was Travis's grandfather's name. Delilah was scared, but at the same time, she felt so good. Perhaps better than ever before in her life. On the last day of the renovation, she came to the apartment again and found Travis there. He looked a little sad and confused. As usual, he showed her his work, and as usual, she sent the photos to Dominic. "Well, it's done," he said, smiling at her. "So, do you like it?" "Yes, I like it," Delilah replied softly. "Thank you." "Well, I'm glad." Travis hesitated slightly. "So, should we order pizza? This time it's on me." "No, we don't need to," and Delilah felt her eyes moistening. She just needed to burst into tears in front of him. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Delilah shook her head and burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Suddenly, she felt his hand on her shoulder. She looked at Travis through her fingers. He looked a little frightened. "Delilah, what's wrong with you?" "Nothing." She turned away and wiped her eyes with her palms. "I'm fine. It's just, I've gotten so used to you." A wrinkle appeared on his forehead again. "Me too," he said quietly. "I even thought about prolonging the renovation. You know, it's so nice with you. Easy. But it's silly. You have a fiancé. But don't cry, Delilah. There's no need." He took her hand and sat her on the windowsill, then sat down next to her. They sat in silence, staring ahead. Delilah was scared. Lord, did he feel it too? Several minutes passed in tense silence. "Oh, sorry. Please. Nerves." Delilah finally spoke. "I'm not myself lately. Probably this wedding is just driving me crazy." "Well, maybe." He shrugged. "I heard that girls are always out of sorts before the wedding. You see, I'm just not sure he's the one," Delilah confessed. I mean, my mom really wants me to marry him. And my dad also thinks he's the best option. And it won't get any better. And of course, my sisters think the same." "And you?" he asked. "What do you think?" "I don't know." She looked at Travis's profile. Tense, as if they were discussing something very important. Maybe they were, actually. Unexpectedly, Travis turned sharply to Delilah. A strange smile played on his face. "You know, I've wanted to ask you something for a long time, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I thought you'd think I'm crazy, but I have to try," he said. "And ask what?" she inquired. "Maybe we could dance, huh?" he suggested, and he pulled out his phone from his pocket and started tapping his fingers on the screen. After a few seconds, music began playing. To Delilah's surprise, it was Frank Sinatra. His voice reverberated off the walls, making it sound voluminous and almost alive. Travis stood up from the windowsill and extended his hand to her. "Mademoiselle." Delilah smiled through her tears and placed her cold fingers in his palm, and they swirled around the room. To Delilah's surprise, he danced excellently, as if he had been trained. The melody flowed from the smartphone's speaker, and Delilah wished it would never, ever end. They looked into each other's eyes, and for some reason, she no longer wanted to cry. Delilah wanted to stay in this moment forever, where there was only music, Travis, and her. But the melody ended. They froze facing each other. Then she hugged him, pressed her body against his, and froze. Whatever happens, she needed this, more than anything else. He gently lifted her chin with his fingers and kissed her. Time seemed to stand still. Delilah felt like a weary traveler who had wandered the desert for many days and finally found an oasis. A thought flickered. She had never felt anything like this with Dominic. He kissed differently, somehow dry, restrained, as if fulfilling some duty. He held her so tightly that Delilah couldn't breathe. He became her breath, her oxygen. Finally, they pulled away from each other. Delilah caught her breath. He looked at her with slightly frightened, shining eyes with dilated pupils. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have," he said. "I feel terrible. Another guy's girlfriend always been a taboo for me. And here, I didn't expect it either," Delilah said, running her palms over his shoulders. "And what do we do now?" "Well, I don't know." He smiled and winked at her. "I'd suggest something, but you'll think I'm cheeky and might even slap me." Delilah chuckled. Travis asked, "Do you love him?" "I don't know," she honestly replied. "I'm not sure. I don't know what to do." Travis didn't know either. Delilah understood. She wouldn't marry Dominic. She simply couldn't. It was like willingly putting her head on the guillotine and waiting for the blade to drop. Dominic wasn't the one for her. It seemed she had met her soulmate. And what could she do if that soulmate turned out to be Travis? They sat together for a long time in the empty apartment. They talked about everything under the sun, about their plans, about the future and the past. "I would like to take you to my place," Travis confessed. "Mom and I bought a small apartment, but there are 2 rooms. Silly, huh? You live in a luxurious house." "Listen, Travis, if I come with you, I'll be coming with nothing," Delilah said. "You know what? I agree." He nodded. "And you?" "I do too," Delilah replied. She returned home feeling like a different person. Delilah knew exactly what to do. She loves Travis, and he loves her. Damn the business. Damn the money. They learned together. A modest life and working in a veterinary clinic would suit her just fine, as long as she's with Travis. It was a lightning strike, illuminating her destiny. And Delilah knew she wasn't wrong. The next day, she decided to talk to her mom. Her dad had gone to work, and Sandra was lying in her room on the bed, reading a book. Delilah hesitantly knocked on the door. "Come in," her mom called. Delilah sat on the edge of the bed. "Mom, we need to talk," she said quietly. Sandra listened to her daughter, and her eyebrows climbed higher and higher. "Have you lost your mind? Do you need to see a doctor?" "Delilah, Dad can find you a good specialist." No, Mom, I don't need a doctor," she replied. I've made a decision. I won't marry Dominic, Mom. I don't love him, you understand." "And so what?" Sandra sat up abruptly, and the book fell to the floor. "Delilah, are you crazy? Everything's already been decided. The wedding, the restaurant, the money." "What money?" Delilah was surprised. "What do you mean?" "The money's been paid." Her mother frowned. "For the wedding, daughter, for the wedding. I'll return everything." "Mom, Grandpa left me something. You know," Delilah said. "I didn't come here to argue. I've already made up my mind. I'm firm in my intentions. I'm just informing you." "No, dear, I'm the one informing you. You'll marry Dominic. It's already decided and not up for discussion." Her mother's voice rose to a shriek. "Or are you planning to go to that village with your, what's his name?" "Travis," Delilah patiently replied. "I haven't decided anything yet. And maybe I won't marry Travis either. But I definitely won't marry Dominic. I don't want this, Mom. Understand?" "And do you think I dreamed of marrying your father?" Sandra exclaimed. "I had plenty of admirers, but your grandfather insisted I choose Adam. And I never regretted it for a minute. Look how we're living, daughter. And if I had done what I wanted, everything would be different. I'd be stuck in a tiny apartment without money." "Mom, money isn't everything," Delilah said. "Ha ha ha. No, darling, you say that because you have them." Sandra chuckled condescendingly. "And try living without them. You simply won't manage. So, Delilah, forget your nonsense. Forget your Travis, and get ready for the wedding." "No, Mom, there won't be a wedding," Delilah firmly replied. Travis's mother, Christina welcomed Delilah easily, as if she had known her for years. Christina indeed looked ill, full-bodied. She moved heavily around the apartment, evoking pity and sympathy from Delilah. The apartment was cluttered with medications. Boxes lay on tables, in cabinets, and even in the refrigerator. But Delilah felt that Christina liked her, and she hoped that Travis would eventually win over her parents too. For the first few nights, Delilah slept on the kitchen couch, then in Travis's room. She felt at home, even better. He went to work. She cooked for him, helped Christina with household chores, and called her own mother. But her mother communicated dryly, demanding only that she stop all this, come back, and make peace with Dominic. However, Delilah was sure she was doing the right thing. Yes, she was truly emotional, impulsive, and crazy. But then why did she feel so good? Travis was her person. She didn't doubt it for a second. She felt good with him every moment, every hour. He made her laugh, supported her, said that Delilah would definitely achieve all her goals, and he'd be there with her, no matter what happened. At night, they quietly talked about the future. Travis dreamed of living in the countryside, building a house, maybe becoming a farmer. Delilah liked these plans. She envisioned her future life. Yes, not in the city and not in a mansion, but together with him, with the man who was her other half. Travis admitted that he liked her from the moment she first came over. You know, Delilah, after you came over that first time, I didn't sleep all night, he said. I thought about you. I've never had that happen before. It felt like I'd been hit over the head. And a silly thought came up. This is my woman. If it's not her, it won't work with anyone else. Goodness. Delilah laughed. You really thought that? Well, yeah. Travis frowned. Don't you believe me? In retaliation for her disbelief, he started tickling her. Delilah laughed until tears streamed down her face. And then he always hugged her tightly, so she couldn't move, and whispered in her ear that he loved her and would never leave her. 2 months passed this way. Delilah lived with Travis, found a job at a veterinary clinic. Then his mother's condition worsened suddenly. The woman was hospitalized, where she passed away 2 weeks later. Delilah was there for Travis, who had lost his ability to smile. After the funeral, he said he was only glad about one thing. His mother had met Delilah and left peacefully. She really loved you, he admitted. She praised me for choosing you. Now she'll watch over us from above and be happy. It's just a shame she didn't get to see her grandchildren. She dreamed of having grandchildren. Delilah's parents still didn't want to communicate with her, but she often talked to her sister Sarah. Sarah thought Delilah was making a mistake, but didn't judge her sister. You'll get over it, she repeated, and come back home. No big deal. Travis only wants your money. I'm telling you, money. Delilah laughed. He doesn't even know about the inheritance or the stamps. What stamps? Sarah asked, surprised. Delilah had to tell her about the gift from their grandfather. The valuable stamp collection meant to fund a farm. Wow, that's something, Sarah said enviously. The favorite granddaughter, Mom's right. But mark my words, he'll leave you. When things start fast, they end fast. It's a law. You can count on it. The law of nature. Dominic is reliable, serious. You're making a mistake, Delilah. Not a mistake, Delilah replied. I know what I'm doing. In the tiny apartment, she felt absolute happiness, especially in the evenings. Travis played the guitar for her, and she listened, admiring him. For the first time in her life, she thought he was the man she wanted to have children with. Then her mom called, inviting her over, and Delilah agreed. The meeting surprisingly went smoothly, and both her father and mother seemed to forget about Dominic, the prospective groom they dreamed of having as a son-in-law. It seemed they were starting to accept Travis's presence and Delilah's love for him. Her mom asked her daughter to stay, live with us, she said softly. We missed you so much. Delilah agreed. Travis wasn't thrilled with her decision, but didn't object. Well, yes, you need to mend things with your parents. I'll wait, he said. I'll be back soon, Travis. I know, the man replied. Delilah returned to her parents, hoping it wouldn't be for long. Sandra was over the moon with happiness. Even her father exchanged anger for mercy. When Delilah talked about Travis, her mom no longer grimaced or insisted that no one could be better than Dominic. And Delilah was glad. She believed that once her parents saw how happy their daughter was with her chosen one, they would love Travis too. After all, he was just impossible not to love. He gave her flowers, inexpensive bouquets of her favorite tea roses. They walked around the city hand in hand. She secretly admired him and dreamed of the day Travis would propose. And Delilah had no doubt that it would happen. Finally, Travis made his move. That day, they were walking along the waterfront on a hot June evening. They stood embracing each other, admiring the sunset. And then Travis cleared his throat, pulled away from Delilah, and said softly, "I love you. Will you marry me?" "Yes, of course I will," she replied. Tears welled up in Delilah's eyes. She hugged him, and he lifted her and spun her around. So, bride-to-be, ready to plan the wedding, Travis declared that the wedding would be whatever Delilah wanted. And she wanted a modest wedding, just the closest ones. No business partners, no extravagant dress. It should be their day, and no one else's. Travis agreed. They decided to have the wedding on the beach. Delilah liked the idea. To her surprise, even her parents didn't object. A wedding is a wedding, after all. Well, her mom was a little disappointed that there wouldn't be a lavish banquet like her older daughters had. But Delilah was firm. She remembered her sister's weddings with horror. Hours-long ceremonies, silly contests, guests most of whom the bride and groom had never seen before in their lives. No, that wasn't her style. Before the wedding, Delilah and Travis decided to live separately. Travis said he wanted to carry Delilah over the threshold. It terribly amused her. Finally, the wedding day arrived. Travis was supposed to pick up Delilah in a car with his friend. She waited for him, dressed in a white dress. She refused to wear a veil, letting her long hair flow down her back. Sarah and Alexis were in the room with her, not hiding their slight maliciousness. "Will he come in an old wreck of a car, I wonder?" asked Alexis, adjusting her makeup in front of the mirror. "No, on a horse." Sarah laughed. "He's from the countryside. After all, there's your prince on a white horse. So what?" Delilah preferred to ignore them. She sat on the couch, watching the hands of the clock on the wall and feeling terribly nervous. "Oh, look, maybe he'll change his mind," giggled Alexis. "Oh, stop it," snapped Delilah. "Why do you have to spoil my mood?" Sorry. Alexis made a guilty face. "I just don't understand what you see in him. No money, no connections, and what? Did you marry for money?" Delilah nervously smoothed the dress on her knees. "That's ridiculous." "Not ridiculous," argued Sarah. "You have to think about the future. You'll end up in the countryside with cows when you could have." Sarah didn't finish her sentence. Delilah's phone rang, displaying an unknown number. "Hello," Delilah answered. "Is this Delilah?" She heard a male voice. "Yes, it's me," she replied, surprised. "It's Frank, Travis's friend. Listen, he's not here. I came for him, waited, knocked on the door, but he's not answering." "What?" Delilah felt her skin grow cold. "What do you mean he's not there?" "I don't know," Frank exclaimed desperately. "He's just not here. I don't know where he went. Should I call the police?" "Yes, call them. Call them right away," Delilah ordered. "I'll come over now." "What happened, Sis?" Alexis asked, alarmed. "Travis is missing," Delilah replied with chilled lips. "He's gone." "Oh, ran away," Sarah chuckled. Delilah shot her a furious look and jumped off the couch. "I'm going to him." "I'll come too," Alexis took Delilah's hand. "I'll call a taxi now. Sarah, you tell our parents it's an emergency." Delilah didn't remember how she got to Travis's house. All the way, she tried to call him, but he didn't pick up. Delilah only heard long beeps. At the door, she found a bewildered Frank, Travis's friend. He was a short, dark-haired guy dressed in a white shirt and black jeans. "I don't know what happened. I called the police, and they told me to wait." He shrugged. "Where could Travis have gone? Do you have keys?" "No," Delilah sobbed. "We were going to make them, but we never did, and I lost mine." The police eventually arrived. They opened the apartment, but Travis wasn't there. His documents, which were always kept in the desk drawer, were missing too. Delilah was in despair. Travis couldn't just leave her like this, just disappear. Something must have happened to him. There was no other explanation. That evening, tearful and barely able to stand, she went home to her parents. Her mom poured her chamomile tea and sat beside her on the couch, soothing her back. Her father silently watched Delilah, as if she were his patient. Sarah and Alexis decided to stay too, to support their sister. "Delilah, dear, I think he ran away," her father finally said. "Didn't want to get married on the wedding day without warning." "He's not like that," the girl said with difficulty. "You don't know him." Her father shrugged. "People fall in love with all sorts. Hormones cloud judgment. By the way, I gathered some information. Just didn't want to tell you." "What information?" Delilah sniffled. "Well, you know, I have connections." Her father gently touched her shoulder. "Travis doesn't actually own the apartment. They were renting it. I don't know what he told you, but Travis has nothing." "I see," Delilah barely whispered. "And anyway, daughter, who knows what kind of person he is? You could say God spared you." Her mother hugged Delilah's shoulders. The girl took a small sip of the now cold tea and closed her eyes. She felt like someone had pulled out her skeleton, leaving her soft, shapeless, like an amoeba. Why didn't he tell me right away?" She raised her eyes, looking from her father to her mother. "Why did he decide to hide it from me?" "He wanted to give you a chance to make the mistake yourself," Adam replied seriously. "It's time to grow up, darling. You've had 2 flings. Your academy and this Travis of yours. Maybe it's time to understand that your parents don't wish you harm. We only want what's best for you. You know that. I recommend you swallow your pride and talk to Dominic." Yes, dear," Sandra nodded. "I know he's ready to forgive and accept you, despite the offense. I talked to his mother." "I don't want to talk to him." Delilah tossed her hair. "I can't talk to him, and I don't want to." "Don't rush her, Sandra," Adam commanded. "Give her time to come to her senses. And, daughter, be wiser from now on." For the next few months, Delilah felt like she was in a daze. At first, she discovered she was pregnant. There was no doubt. The father of the child was Travis. This news shocked Sandra. She demanded that her daughter have an abortion. But Delilah refused, hoping that Travis would come back, that something had happened to him, and he hadn't abandoned her. But Travis was never found. No trace, no clue. He wasn't in hospitals or morgues. He didn't withdraw money from his card. Nothing. Here was a person, and then he wasn't. But Delilah still wanted to have a child with Travis. Unfortunately, this dream was not meant to come true either, because one night Delilah woke up in pain. Sandra called an ambulance. Delilah was taken to the hospital, and by morning, she had lost the baby. She didn't even know if it was a boy or a girl. Dominic came to visit her. He brought Delilah flowers, candies. He looked at her with such pity that she wanted to sink into the ground from shame. "Delilah, I still want us to be together, no matter what," Dominic said to her. "Why?" she asked. After all this, for some reason, Delilah hoped he would say something about love. She desperately needed love, and believed that if Dominic said those coveted words to her, she could love him too. Maybe she could, because that's what I decided, Dominic replied. Delilah, we all make mistakes, and everyone deserves a second chance. Understand? He left. Delilah was alone again. Her parents also urged her to come to her senses and marry Dominic, as if it could solve all her problems. Emptied and extinguished, she agreed. For the second time, she decided to become Dominic's wife. Why not, if it would make everyone better off? Probably, fate itself was leading her in that direction. And she resisted for some reason, trying to turn onto another path and turning into another dead end in the end. 3 months later, Delilah and Dominic got married. Lavish, just as he wanted. They invited his business partners, friends, and employees from the beauty salon network. Delilah smiled, pretending to be happy, even convincing herself of it. But inside, that emptiness remained. The one that appeared when her grandfather died. The newlyweds moved into the same apartment where Delilah once danced with Travis, where she met him, where she felt both absolutely happy and unhappy at the same time because of the feeling of impossibility to be with Travis. And now she was going to live there, but with Dominic. Delilah promised herself that she would definitely love her husband and become a good wife to him. She quit her job. Dominic didn't want his woman spending time at the clinic and complained that his wife reeked of dog hair from head to toe. Delilah's life changed. She cleaned, cooked for Dominic, and in the evenings went with him to various events. However, the latter happened quite rarely because she didn't really like it. She became a homebody. She felt safe at home. But Dominic insisted that she be with him. So Delilah put on evening dresses and went to the salon where they did her makeup and hair. And she looked at herself in the mirror and wondered, why did her eyes seem so empty? She had everything. A home, a husband, money. She was supposed to be happy. Why wasn't she? 5 years passed. Dominic's business was booming. He opened new salons, some even in other cities. They bought a house outside the city, in a small village, an hour's drive from the metropolis. Delilah almost forgot about Travis. He only appeared in her dreams occasionally. For some reason, in her dreams, they walked together along a moonlit road. They worked in silence, and she secretly admired his profile, as she once did long ago, it seems, in a previous life when she dreamed of becoming his wife and the mother of his children. Delilah didn't like such dreams. It was hard to wake up and realize that it was all just a dream, that it was all untrue. I wonder, what happened to Travis? Where did he disappear to? What happened to him? Maybe he died. Or is he hiding somewhere? But why? He didn't steal anything from her, didn't take anything, except her heart. And now she lives with an emptiness in her chest. And this emptiness cannot be filled by anything or anyone. That's what Delilah thought until Polly was born. The emptiness suddenly disappeared somewhere, as if it had never been there at all. Polly was a copy of Delilah, just as dark, slender, and tiny as a kitten. And she meowed just as cutely when she wanted milk or maternal attention. Dominic was reluctant to have a child for a long time. But for Delilah, after the move, it became a fixed idea. And finally, her husband gave his consent. Delilah's pregnancy went smoothly. She ran, took long walks, and breathed fresh air. The last trimester was especially memorable for her. It was the happiest and yet the most difficult. Happy because Delilah felt great, as if pregnancy had given her new strength. She cleaned the house, moved furniture, went to the city to buy a new rug or curtains. The process of setting up brought her incomparable pleasure. But it was difficult because she couldn't wait to see her daughter, hold her in her arms, and hug her. Becoming a mother, Delilah felt like she was reborn herself. She sang songs to Polly, didn't let her out of her arms, admired every grimace, every little finger on her hands and feet. Dominic chuckled at her. Delilah didn't take offense. She was ready for anything as long as Polly was happy and lacked nothing. Delilah saw Dominic rarely. Their daughter demanded all her attention, and her husband spent a lot of time at work. Delilah knew Dominic was having some problems, but she believed he would handle it. After all, he was an excellent specialist in his field, a true professional, and her dad was thrilled with him. And Mom too. Parents said they were lucky with their son-in-law. It seemed like her dad even loved Dominic more than Delilah herself. But the woman didn't care. She was consumed by motherhood, and then Alexis moved in with them. It all started with a late phone call. Delilah was home alone. Dominic had gone to another city for negotiations regarding the opening of a new branch of his network. "Hey," Alexis said quietly. "Am I bothering you?" "No," Delilah replied. "Polly is already asleep. I'm resting." "What's up?" She was surprised. Alexis rarely called, only congratulated on holidays, sometimes inquired about her niece's health. Their sister's communication was limited to that. But there was no holiday now, and they had talked about Polly a couple of days ago. "Delilah, I have problems. Can you help?" Alexis asked. "What happened?" Delilah was scared. "Oh, nothing. Like everyone else, I'll come and tell you." "Do you mind?" "No. Dominic just left. He'll be back in a couple of days," the younger sister replied. "Come on over, Alexis." Soon Alexis was standing at the doorstep of the apartment. She looked bad. Her eyes were red. Her face was sunken. Delilah poured her sister some tea. Together they settled in the kitchen at the huge table that Dominic loved for its size and solidity. Delilah would have preferred a smaller table, but she wasn't used to arguing with her spouse. "Oh, Delilah, basically, I'm going to divorce my husband," Alexis confessed. "What?" Delilah couldn't believe her ears. "Alexis, why? Everything was fine with you." "Yes, for the public. It was fine, Delilah," she replied. "But in reality, as long as he depended on Dad, he was perfect. Flowers, breakfast in bed, all that. But now, you know, he had a falling out with Dad over money. Didn't want to share." Wait. I don't understand anything." Delilah frowned. "Let's go into details." It turned out that Alexis's husband, Jeffrey, had his own psychological rehabilitation center, which he opened with the help of his father-in-law, Adam. They worked together. Adam sent patients to the center for a hefty fee. Patients and relatives trusted Adam, so Jeffrey never ran out of clients. Naturally, Adam shared the profits with Jeffrey, keeping it all in the family, so to speak. Then Jeffrey decided that he no longer needed to share. He built up his own client base, feeling confident to set sail on his own. Of course, Adam didn't like this, and he threatened to ruin Jeffrey's reputation. It didn't scare Jeffrey, but Adam decided to take action, and soon there were several publications in the press claiming that the rehabilitation center was using unacceptable methods. "Can you imagine?" Alexis exclaimed indignantly. "They say they beat people there, starve them, and who knows what else. Haven't you read about it?" "Alexis, honestly, no," Delilah admitted. "I don't have time. I'm constantly with my daughter." "Oh, you," waved off the older sister. "You are sitting here and don't know anything." So, they had a falling out, and Jeffrey started taking his anger out on me, saying I'm old, ugly, and that I cook poorly. And recently, I caught him in bed with some girl. "What does Dad say?" "Huh?" Delilah asked. "This is a nightmare, Alexis. You won't believe it. Dad says he just wanted to scare Jeffrey and demands that I continue living with him. Like, you're a woman. You should endure it. Delilah, can you imagine?" And Mom said the same, that everyone cheats. "I'm not the first. I'm not the last. Just live with your husband. End of story." "Oh my God, how awful," exclaimed Delilah. "So, I'm thinking the same thing. But where am I supposed to live? I don't want to go to him. And this apartment originally belonged to Jeffrey. Will you let your sister stay? Delilah. Of course, I let you in, nodded Delilah. The house is big. I'll give you a room. Listen, will your husband be upset? The older sister asked, sobbing. Alexis, calm down. He won't. Delilah promised. We're family. I have to help you in this situation. What do you plan to do next? Of course, get a divorce, declared Alexis. After everything he said to me and what I saw with my own eyes, I can't and don't want to live with him anymore. So, Alexis moved in with her younger sister, Delilah. She promised to help with the child. At first, she did. But soon Alexis lost interest in her niece. Instead, she wanted to collaborate with Dominic. Agreeing to meet her halfway, he hired her as an administrator at one of the salons. Polly often fell ill. Delilah couldn't always keep the large house tidy or prepare dinner, leading to arguments with Dominic. Dominic returning home together with Alexis to the exhausted, overwhelmed Delilah, covered in baby food stains, was becoming routine. Dissatisfied, Dominic ordered takeout, while Alexis repeatedly talked to Delilah about her failure to fulfill her duties. These conversations always began the same way. Alexis stayed with her younger sister in the kitchen to help with the dishes, while Dominic watched over Polly. Delilah, this won't work, Alexis said. Dominic has it rough. You can't imagine how hard he works, how difficult it is for him. He wants to come back to a clean house with dinner ready. Polly hasn't left my arms all day, Delilah replied. What can I do? Sometimes her stomach hurts, sometimes something else. Nothing seems to help. Well, other women manage. Alexis frowned. You're not the only mother in the world. Everyone copes. Mom managed with all of us. Delilah, what's wrong with you? Mom had a maid. Remember? Delilah reminded her sister. She cleaned, cooked, and could play with us while Mom rested or went out. Delilah, Mom had 3 children, and you have only Polly. I feel sorry for Dominic. Truly. He's terribly tired. I can see it. And you're just staying indoors and letting yourself go. Dominic also started hinting that Delilah wasn't handling her responsibilities. When lying in bed with her in the evenings, he often brought up all the things she hadn't managed to do. Why was there a mountain of laundry in the basket? Delilah, is it hard to put it in the wash? And dust everywhere. Can't you vacuum it up? He'd say. Yes. Polly cries when I turn on the vacuum cleaner. She's afraid of the noise. Delilah replied. Well, let her cry. Then calm down. All kids cry. And then what? Dominic frowned. Delilah, I've provided you with everything possible. Bought everything. This isn't acceptable. Listen, maybe you're just suffering from postpartum depression. Take some pills. Talk to your dad. He'll recommend something. I'm not sick. Delilah snapped. I don't have any depression. I just can't keep up, but you should be able to. Dominic smiled condescendingly, and his smile annoyed Delilah terribly. I do a lot, so should you. Nevertheless, Dominic spoke to his father-in-law and brought Delilah a bottle of pink pills. Here, take these. He handed Delilah the medicine. What's this? She turned the bottle in her hand. These are to help you start managing everything. He smiled. Your dad gave them to me. I told him how you've changed, how you don't do anything, just argue and get irritated over trivial things. I'm not taking these. Delilah shouted. She wanted to smash the bottle against the wall, or even better, throw it in Dominic's face. But you have to. The man frowned. And what if I refuse? She asked. Well, then we'll have to think of something else. Her husband shrugged. There are good clinics that deal with people like you. You know what I mean. They won't let you in there with a child. And besides, I've been told it's better to start treatment right away. Don't let your fatigue and irritability worsen. Take the pills, it'll be easier for you. And if not, the treatment could last for years at a rehabilitation center. and you won't see your child. Delilah was scared because Dominic didn't like to joke and couldn't. She began taking the pills, not because she felt sick. No, she was genuinely afraid he'd send her to the hospital, and Delilah would be separated from her daughter, and that was much worse for her than death. Delilah did become calmer. She stopped getting irritated, no longer got angry at her husband, and slept soundly. Dominic wasn't entirely pleased with the latter, though. It wasn't easy for him to coax his wife to attend to a crying Polly. But overall, he was satisfied with the effect of the pills, and Delilah felt somewhat indifferent about it. The main thing was that she was by her little girl's side. Gradually, Dominic changed, and not for the better. Delilah irritated him more and more. He often talked about her needing treatment in the hospital. Delilah refused. She cried, ran away from him. Several times, she had real hysterics. She cried until she was completely drained of strength. Delilah's sister and Alexis sided with Dominic. Delilah, you can see for yourself what's happening to you. You're not yourself. Talk to Dad. He'll find you a better doctor, and you'll get back to normal quickly. Why suffer? Alexis said thoughtfully. I'm not suffering. Delilah said. I'm fine. And stop bothering me. You know, to be honest, I've long thought that well, sometimes you make strange decisions. Alexis said thoughtfully. First, the academy, then Travis appeared in your life. No, I understand. He was handsome. But why rush into marrying him? Well, you can have fun, but with the thought that it's all temporary. Do you understand? I don't want to talk about it. Tears welled up in Delilah's eyes. Alexis, I'm fine. Perfectly fine. Well, as you wish, little sister. Alexis shrugged. But, Delilah, I'd still think about it if I were you. Delilah became increasingly absent-minded. She began to forget to feed her daughter and couldn't understand why she was crying. A couple of times, she left Polly on the balcony of the second floor. Polly had already learned to work by then. Delilah realized that if she fell asleep or got distracted, Polly could climb onto a chair and topple over the railing. These incidents terrified her terribly. Delilah didn't dare to tell anyone about it except her sister. Oh my God, what a nightmare! Alexis exclaimed. Do you really not want to talk to Dad? Delilah, I don't want to. The woman replied firmly. I know him. Dad will send me to the hospital. I'll lie there until Polly forgets me. Well, then we need to hire a housekeeper. Alexis sighed. I talked to Dominic about it. You know I'm on your side, sis. I see that something's happening to you. Dominic doesn't want that, of course. He's like that. Thinks a woman should take care of the household herself, or work. Listen, Alexis, talk to him. Delilah sighed. I really can't cope. Maybe it'll get easier. Alexis managed to persuade Dominic. So Angela, a kind 50-year-old woman, appeared in the house, taking care of cleaning and cooking. Of course, Dominic expressed his dissatisfaction in every way possible, but Delilah didn't care. It became easier for her. Now Dominic's wife could focus solely on her daughter, and she grew attached to Angela. They cooked together, talked, and when they managed to finish their chores early, they watched old movies in the living room. Dominic didn't approve of the last incident. He believed that the housekeeper should know her place. But Delilah felt comfortable and at ease with Angela. Besides, she didn't feel lonely anymore. Then something happened that nearly drove Delilah insane. It turned out that Polly was allergic to peanuts. She tried a little pasta and immediately turned red, swelling up, wheezing for air. Angela called an ambulance for the girl, which arrived within minutes. Polly had to be hospitalized. Delilah spent several horrible days in the hospital with her daughter. Fortunately, everything turned out fine. The doctor ordered to keep a stock of allergy symptom relief medication at home and strictly prohibited giving Polly any peanut-containing products. That's when Dominic unleashed a terrible scandal on Delilah. You need to watch the child. My God, I hired a housekeeper. Who else do we need? A nanny. Maybe you need a nanny too. You're unbelievable, wife. Dominic exclaimed. I just let her try a tiny bit. Delilah screamed in response. No one could have predicted she'd have an allergic reaction. You need to get treatment, Dominic said. If this happens again, you'll go to a mental institution. I'm telling you. Is that clear? Alexis once again sided with Dominic. I'll make sure there are no peanut products in the house, Alexis declared. Delilah can't handle it. Yeah, Alexis. Thank you. You're my only hope. The man nodded. Delilah ran out of the room. She heard the last words Alexis said to Dominic. And how did such different sisters end up in one family? From that day on, Delilah never slept in the Marital bedroom again. She moved in with her daughter, Polly. She didn't want to sleep with Dominic anymore, and it was calmer for her next to her daughter. Delilah couldn't forget Polly's swollen, frightened face and wheezing breath. The only support Delilah had was the housekeeper, Angela. Well, it happens, she sighed. My son almost died when he choked on a bean in his childhood. Imagine. He was eating, I was cooking, and suddenly I hear him wheezing. Luckily, I realized, grabbed him by the legs, turned him over, and shook him, and out came the bean. Kids, Delilah. Anything can happen with them. But Delilah still considered herself a terrible mother, and thought that Polly had almost died because of her. Dominic also believed that Delilah was a worthless mother. When Polly turned 3, he decided to take the family abroad. Delilah was supposed to take Polly to the city, handle the paperwork, and take some photos. Polly was terribly afraid of the photographer. She cried, covered her face with her hands, threw tantrums. Delilah gave up. She knew that if Polly didn't want something, it was impossible to make her, and she couldn't shout at her daughter. Polly refused to pose for the photos, even in exchange for her favorite chocolate or toy. Delilah had to return home empty-handed, and her husband, Dominic, was furious. Delilah, nothing can be entrusted to you, he said. It's like I'm living with a disabled person. But she didn't want to. What was I supposed to do, Dominic? Tie her up? Ha! Hit her? Delilah retorted. You're a mother. You should know what to do in such situations. Dominic said. Let Alexis take her. Your sister will definitely manage it. Alexis did manage to take the photos eventually. Although Polly complained to her mom that she yelled at her and threatened to give her to a stranger if she didn't stop crying. Delilah then had a serious falling out with her sister. Delilah, what's gotten into you? I don't understand. Alexis wondered. She was screaming. But we needed the photos, but not like that. Delilah shouted. Now she sleeps poorly, afraid that some stranger will come for her. Alexis, it wasn't worth it. No photo is worth that. Remember that. You're exaggerating. Alexis casually smiled and stopped shouting. You have weak nerves, sis. No one will tell you the truth except me. But you really need treatment. What are you so afraid of, Delilah? A couple of weeks in the clinic, IVs, injections, and you'll be good as new. And you've just turned your husband's life into hell. Understand? And Delilah understood. She understood that she wanted to run away, anywhere, even to hell, just not to stay with her husband. Somehow, when he went away on long business trips, Delilah felt better. She slept well. She didn't cry at night, stopped worrying to the point of shaking about Polly. But as soon as Dominic returned, everything went back to square one. But Delilah had nowhere to run. She knew her parents wouldn't take her back. Not for anything. Dad simply adored Dominic, and Mom always sided with him. Often Delilah thought about her grandfather's stamp collection. Just sell a couple of stamps, buy an apartment, and leave with Polly. This plan seemed perfect to her. But Delilah was stopped by thoughts that perhaps Dominic was right, and she was a worthless mother. Besides, she might not be able to handle the child alone. No, it's better to leave everything as it is for now. And let Polly inherit the stamp collection. Let Polly decide what to do with her great-grandfather's legacy. Maybe she'll want to study in another country or buy a nice apartment. For this, Delilah was ready to endure a little longer. Though she didn't know exactly how long. The marital relationship between Delilah and Dominic was no more. She slept with Polly on the ground floor, while Dominic slept upstairs. Also residing there was Alexis, who couldn't seem to get her personal life in order after her divorce and continued to live in Dominic and Delilah's house. Yet Alexis felt no awkwardness. She lived in someone else's family as if it were perfectly normal. What audacity! Another 2 years passed. Delilah took the pills Dominic brought her, read a lot, spent time with Polly, and felt like her life was turning into a real nightmare. Although it couldn't be called a nightmare. The nightmare was the day her grandfather died, the disappearance of Travis, and the day she lost her first child. Now she lived as if in a swamp. Sticky, unpleasant, cold, but so familiar. There was a glimmer of light here. That was her daughter, whom Delilah simply adored. She could endure. The main thing was not to think about how everything could have turned out. One night, Delilah woke up from an unfamiliar feeling. Her chest felt as though it was being squeezed by an invisible, cold hand. She looked at Polly's crib, where her daughter was peacefully sleeping, hands under her head. Delilah turned to the other side. Sleep wouldn't come anymore. She got up, decided to work around the house. Putting the baby monitor in her pocket, Delilah left the room. It was quiet. You could even hear the ticking of the clocks hanging on the walls. Delilah decided to stand on the balcony. Perhaps it was her favorite place in the house. There she placed a rocking chair and a small table. Delilah loved sitting in the chair, wrapped in a blanket, and looking at the garden and the forest surrounding the settlement. Somewhere there was a farm where Angela bought fresh milk and eggs. Delilah just couldn't seem to make it to that farm. Odd. She'd been living here for so long, but she just couldn't get there. The woman climbed to the second floor. The path to the balcony led through the bedroom she once shared with Dominic. Delilah carefully opened the door and froze. Dominic wasn't alone. Someone was sleeping next to her husband, and that someone was wrapped in a blanket. Delilah initially thought her eyes were deceiving her. Maybe the light was just falling from the window. But no. Delilah recognized a light lock of long hair on the pillow. She turned on the light. Dominic abruptly sat up and rubbed his eyes, looking at his wife. Damn, what's going on? Finally, the man saw Delilah. Delilah saw Alexis, her sister, who lay next to Dominic. Neither light nor loud sounds could wake her up. And what is this? Delilah asked quietly. Dominic, what's going on here? What's going on? Alexis opened her eyes and, bewildered, stared at Delilah. And what are you doing here? Delilah, what am I doing here? Delilah felt like she was about to wake up. Dominic, Alexis. He got up, put on a robe over his pajamas, and leisurely tied the belt. Delilah's husband looked completely calm, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. As if it wasn't him who had just been caught in bed with another woman. Not just another woman, but his wife's sister. Alexis sat up, pulling her knees to her chin, and shifted her gaze from Dominic to Delilah, and back again. Let's talk. Dominic approached Delilah, took her by the elbow, and pulled his wife along. But please, no scandals right away. Delilah complied. She followed Dominic, her heart pounding as if she had just finished a marathon. They entered Dominic's study. Sit down. He nodded towards the chair. Delilah sat, placing her hands on her knees, while Dominic took his seat behind the desk. So, what was that all about, Dominic? Delilah asked again. You see, I can't go on like this anymore. He calmly replied. Look at what you've driven me to. And what exactly have I driven you to? She asked, surprised. Delilah, I'm a young, healthy man. And Alexis has always been there, helping me, supporting me. She practically replaced Polly's mother. I've asked you numerous times to get help. But what choice did I have? Delilah, what choice did you have? You could have chosen not to cheat and behave normally. She retorted, I did everything I could. I even talked to your father about you. He even suggested divorcing you. But I couldn't leave you. Dominic frowned. Anyway, since we're here, I want to offer you a choice. There are two options, my dear, and what are they? Delilah asked, her voice faltering. Well, it's simple. Either we leave everything as it is, and I file for divorce myself, but you'll never see the child again. He smirked. I can't leave my daughter with you. Alexis will be a witness. You're behaving irrationally. Several times you nearly killed Polly. Or, Delilah asked, her voice barely audible, or I call an ambulance. I tell them you tried to harm yourself or your daughter in front of me and Alexis. You understand? They'll believe me, not you. And then, who knows? Dominic shrugged. Why are you doing this? Delilah whispered. We could just peacefully go our separate ways, and no harm would come to anyone. You're killing me. I won't be able to live without Polly. I just won't, because she's my daughter. Oh, Delilah, it's all so complicated. Dominic smiled. You know, it's a long explanation, but I'm a noble person. You think it over for now. I'll leave you here. I'll be back in half an hour. Hopefully, you'll make the right decision. And don't touch any sharp objects. I have a letter opener on my desk. Don't cut yourself. He stood up and worked past Delilah. She heard the key turn in the lock. Dominic always kept his office locked. Delilah sat frozen, staring ahead with a glazed look. She was trapped, unable to escape. He would call an ambulance now. She would be taken to the psychiatric ward, and she would never see Polly again. Delilah's father would be on Dominic's side, and Alexis, her sister, would tell their parents that Delilah had been quietly losing her mind all these years, and Dominic had to take drastic measures, supposedly to protect their daughter from a deranged mother. How well they had all thought this through. Delilah rose and approached the desk slowly. Dominic placed the paper knife prominently on the table. It was clear what he wanted from her. One move, just one, and all the problems would be solved. Delilah gripped the knife tightly in her hands. Its handle chilled her skin. She brought the blade to her throat, then slowly placed the knife on the table and collapsed into Dominic's chair. The luxurious chair was upholstered in Italian leather. Delilah knew how long he had spent choosing it. Dominic always wanted to have the very best. Too bad he chose a subpar wife. At least he got lucky with his mistress. Delilah noticed a handwritten note on the table with an email address. She brought the paper closer to her eyes. I wonder what this is. Probably just another set of business calculations. What should she do? She didn't want to die, but she couldn't stay either. Unsure of her next steps, Delilah opened the window, letting in a rush of cool air into the room. Goosebumps formed on her skin. She looked down. It was high, but the door to the office burst open. What are you doing? Dominic shouted. Stop. Delilah jumped. Miraculously, she landed on a flower bed, which softened her full. She ran, not knowing where to. Maybe she really was insane, but she wasn't going to do what Dominic wanted from her. Later, she would hardly remember how she ran along the road, how she turned into the woods, how she emerged onto a dirt track, and how she heard the sound of Dominic's approaching car as he went after her. She remembered opening her eyes and seeing Travis. Travis, who hadn't changed much over the years. His hair, eyes, lips. She saw him and realized that everything would be fine now. Delilah would reclaim her life and her destiny, whatever it took. Let's go. Can you work? H.E. stood up and gently pulled her towards him. She got to her feet. Travis's touch was firm yet gentle. It wasn't easy to break free from his embrace. Long ago, she used to pretend to be offended or jealous, and he would hug her tightly, saying he adored her, that he loved only her, naughty and capricious as she was. She would pretend to want to break free then. But in reality, Delilah didn't want to at all. And both she and Travis knew that. It had been so long ago. "Yes, I can work," she said, not realizing what she was doing, leaning her nose against my shoulder. "Travis, I thought you weren't in this world anymore. We'll figure it out," he promised. "But for now, you need to warm up, and you need to be examined by a doctor." Delilah nodded obediently. For some reason, she just knew. Now that he was by her side, nothing bad could happen. They walked slowly along the road. "And didn't you recognize me?" Delilah asked. He just looked at her with puzzlement. So familiar, so close, as if those 10 years hadn't happened. Had she changed so much? Travis led Delilah to a small house and sat her on the couch. "Wait here." He gently pushed her hair back from her forehead. She wanted to ask him to stay, but she didn't have the strength. Delilah looked around. She was in a small room. There was only a couch covered with a faded cheap blanket, a table, and a bedside table with a television. Apparently, the inhabitants of the house lived poorly, although they carefully maintained cleanliness. After a couple of minutes, Travis appeared with a tall, thin man in his 60s. Here, Travis sat next to Delilah and took her hand. She was alone on the road. The man leaned in so that his face was at the same level as Delilah's. "Do you remember your name?" he asked. "Delilah," she replied. I'm okay. Listen, I don't need a doctor." "Well, what happened?" the man asked, concerned. "My goodness, you were soaked through." "Travis, bring something. Some pants, a sweater, make tea. And you, dear, tell us what happened." I ran away from home," Delilah admitted honestly. "I have nowhere to go. And my husband seems to want to get rid of me. He says I'm crazy." "And are you crazy?" the man asked. "No, of course not." Delilah shook her head. "I'm perfectly normal." "All right, I'll take your word for it." The man smiled. "By the way, my name is Nathan." "Listen, Delilah, maybe we should call the police or a doctor for..." "No, I don't need the police or a doctor. Please, don't. Understand? If my husband Dominic finds me..." "Don't worry." Nathan gently squeezed Delilah's hand. "You see, it's not the first time I've helped people, and I prefer to listen to their words. We have no reason to fear you. Fragile girl is hardly going to harm us. Right, Travis?" Travis smiled and placed a pair of sweatpants and a sweater on Delilah's lap. "I think we're safe." Delilah wasn't listening to the elderly man. She was looking at Travis. "Don't you remember me?" "How is that possible?" Travis looked at her with a long, attentive gaze. "No, I don't remember. Are we acquainted or something?" "That's interesting," Nathan said. "Get changed. I'll make up a bed for you here. Get some rest. And tomorrow we'll talk." Delilah was sure she wouldn't be able to fall asleep, but she drifted off as soon as her head touched the pillow. In the morning, Travis woke her up. Delilah struggled to resist the urge to hug him. He still didn't recognize Delilah. She even began to doubt herself. Perhaps it wasn't him after all. Just someone who looked similar. But no, she wasn't mistaken. She always remembered his profile, his smile, his eyes, his hair, and Travis's voice. Delilah decided not to rush. First, she needed to understand where she was. It turned out that Nathan owned a farm where Angela bought eggs and milk. The farm was small but profitable, providing a comfortable living for both Nathan, Travis, and several other workers. Delilah told Nathan her story, of course, without unnecessary details. She decided to be honest. There was no point in lying. There had been too much deceit in her life. The elderly man listened attentively, then sighed. "Oh, girl, stay here for now. We'll figure something out. And you say you're a veterinarian, right? We actually need a veterinarian. And my documents." Delilah was scared. "We'll figure something out." I managed to help Travis. And what about him? How did he end up here with you? Delilah asked. Nathan fell silent. The woman understood that it was some kind of secret that the elderly man didn't intend to reveal to her. You see, I know him, she said. He was very close to me. Later. Girl. Later. First, let's solve the pressing issues. Nathan smiled. So, will you stay here for now? Yes, I'll stay. But we need to decide what to do with my daughter. And I need to contact my parents. Contact your parents. But they're on your husband's side. According to your words. Nathan smirked. In an hour, there will be a team of psychiatrists here who will take you to a mental hospital. So I think for now, it's best to wait a bit. Let's see what they'll do. Nathan's gaze became strange, sharp, and frightening. But then he smiled and his eyes softened. Go on. Travis is in the barn. He'll explain to you what needs to be done. Delilah nodded and ran to Travis. He still didn't remember her, as if those memories had been erased from his mind. But he remembered his mom, Christina. He remembered his life in the village. Delilah asked him to tell her what happened next, but Travis just shook his head like a wet dog and changed the subject. But Delilah didn't mind. The main thing was that she found him. The main thing was that he was alive. But something had happened to him. Surprisingly, Dominic didn't look for Delilah at all. There were no announcements, no police, no volunteers or rescuers. And Delilah was amazed by this. Did her husband really not care? What does Dominic want to achieve? Did he decide that Delilah disappeared forever? Or is he hiding the fact of her disappearance himself? Delilah desperately wanted to talk to her parents, but she couldn't bring herself to call them, and Nathan discouraged her. And Travis insisted that Nathan was worth trusting, that he knows life better than anyone else. Delilah worked on the farm for a month. Gradually, her skills were coming back, and she remembered how much she loved her profession. She regretted wasting so much time. She often thought about Polly. But Nathan said it wasn't time to take any action yet, and Delilah believed him, although her life seemed even stranger to her than before. One day, Travis told Delilah that Nathan used to be a notorious criminal authority. He had a son whom he involved in his dubious business, and then something irreversible happened. His son died during a confrontation. Nathan then stepped away from his affairs and voluntarily surrendered to the police, seeking to atone for his sins. After being released, he decided to take up farming. Nathan bought a small plot of land, built a barn, hired workers, and lived quietly and peacefully, seemingly forgetting his past. How did you two meet? Delilah once asked. How did you end up here, Travis? The man looked pensive, and she desperately wanted to hug him. I don't even understand it myself. I remember waking up in the hospital. Nothing else. As if I hadn't lived before that. Just fragments. They were giving me injections. I slept for days. Then they started giving me pills. But I felt really bad. So, I started hiding them under my cheek. Then spitting them out and flushing them down the toilet. Oh my. Delilah whispered. What a nightmare. Yeah. Things got a bit clearer then. Travis sighed. I decided to escape. I ran when they forgot to lock the ward. I don't even know how I got past the guards. I walked for a long time. Just walked and walked. Then I passed out from hunger, I guess. Nathan found me. He was driving from the city to the farm. Well, he brought me here, cleaned me up, fed me, and offered me a job. He even arranged all the paperwork, used his old connections. So, now I live here. I think he sees me as his son. You know, the one who died. And I'm grateful to him. If it weren't for him, I don't know what would have happened to me. Now I'm trying to remember what happened. And so far, no luck. It's like a piece of my brain was just cut out. You know, don't you remember me either? Delilah asked. No. Tell me, Travis requested. Later, when you remember, I'll tell you. The woman replied sadly. One day, Nathan called Delilah into his small office. It was hard to call this room an office. There was a small table and a bookcase. Delilah sat across from Nathan, and he smiled at her warmly. "Listen, your father, he's a psychiatrist, right?" Nathan asked. "Yeah, he's the head of the department." "Ah, is this him?" Nathan showed Delilah a photo. "Yes, that's my dad. It's his picture from the hospital's website." "Why?" "Nothing. It just seems like I'm starting to understand something." "What do you start to understand?" Delilah asked him in surprise. "Well, you'll ask him yourself. You know, today your father is going to visit his son-in-law. I suggest we go there too, along with Travis. Don't worry, Randy and Austin will be with us." Randy and Austin were two farm workers who once belonged to criminal gangs along with Nathan. Delilah would have never guessed it, as the guys behaved friendly, polite, and extremely courteous towards her. Delilah learned about their past only from Travis. They both come from orphanages. Travis told Delilah. Nathan took pity on them and took them in, provided them with work and accommodation, but on the condition that if they return to their old ways, they'll be out of here in a flash. That's how it is. The next day they went to Dominic's. Delilah was trembling with fear, but Nathan assured her that everything would be fine. Delilah was asked to stay in the car, and she nodded. Travis had told her many times that she should do as Nathan said. He repeated that Nathan had lived his life and learned from bitter experience. She only asked not to harm anyone, and the elderly man, hearing her, grimaced. "Well, my dear, what harm? I just want to talk to your family and clarify some things for myself. If I'm right, which I most likely am, then everything will be fine for you." Delilah spent almost an hour in the car. Unable to wait any longer, she went into the house. Everyone was in the living room. Dominic, Alexis, and her father. Nathan lounged on the sofa, while Austin and Randy stood beside him. Upon noticing Delilah, Nathan frowned. "Well, my dear, I did ask. But okay, you'll be useful too. So, Dominic, let's hear what you told me." "What's the point of this?" muttered Dominic. "It seems like we've sorted it out. I think your wife, Dominic, would be interested to know this. Or you, Alexis. Adam, you've also kept secrets from your daughter, haven't you?" "What's going on, Dad?" Delilah asked anxiously. "I had to do it," Adam said quietly. "For you, Delilah. I did it all for you. Forgive me." The woman sank into a chair. "What should I forgive?" Delilah asked. "Many years ago, Adam decided to get rid of Travis. He understood that Travis was not a match for his daughter. Dominic, an entrepreneur, a talented young man from a good family, was a better match. And Dominic assured him that he wouldn't be in debt. Both believed that families should unite. Adam planned to invest in Dominic's business. Dominic promised that his father-in-law would receive excellent dividends. Only Travis and his daughter's foolish love were in the way. The decision was made quickly. Travis had no relatives. No one would really look for him except Delilah. It was a simple matter. Travis had to end up in a psychiatric hospital. Adam had to hire people to carry out the task without witnesses. They broke into Travis's apartment, hit him on the head, and dragged him to the car. And it was decided to do this a day before the wedding to hurt Delilah even more. She believed that Travis simply deceived her and left her at the altar. "I remember you," Travis spoke up. "I saw you there, in the hospital." Adam looked at Travis with hatred. "Yes, but everything didn't go according to plan." And indeed, it didn't go according to plan. Travis managed to escape due to the heavy medications he received in the hospital. Travis remembered nothing. Meeting Nathan, he replaced his deceased son. Travis didn't remember Delilah, and it turned out that Nathan's farm was located near the house where Delilah lived with her family. For many years, they were close by, but they never suspected it. Dominic didn't possess entrepreneurial talents. He had developed a gambling addiction, just like his father once did. He lost large sums of money that were supposed to go towards business development and employee salaries. Employees were leaving rapidly, which drove Dominic to rage and despair. And a solution presented itself. Alexis told Dominic about the stamp collection left by Delilah's grandfather in her inheritance. She assured him that Delilah possessed a considerable fortune that she was unwilling to share. Dominic, upon learning this, was terribly angered. "That wretch, my dear wife," he exclaimed. "Why is she hoarding this stupid collection when she could invest it in the business?" The safe password was kept by Delilah. Alexis and Dominic searched the entire house. Alexis even went to her parents' house to find the coveted envelope with the safe password. But it was nowhere to be found. They figured it might be kept with the notary, and the only way to obtain it was to kill Delilah. Then her husband becomes her sole heir, and the collection ends up in Dominic's pocket. But Alexis opposed this plan. She couldn't kill her sister. She proposed a softer, as she thought, option. Simply send Delilah to a mental institution. Declare her incapacitated. And then Dominic would have the opportunity to manage his wife's property. "And you thought Dad would help?" Delilah sighed. "Dad, but you've always been on his side, haven't you?" The father didn't respond to his daughter. Dominic looked at Delilah with a heavy gaze. She didn't take her eyes off her husband. She was no longer afraid of him. "Oh, darling, you thought suicide was also a good solution, didn't you?" Dominic didn't respond. Delilah looked at her husband for the last time, and she left the living room, heading to the children's room. Polly was playing with Angela with dolls on the carpet. "Mama!" The little girl cried out. "You've come back." She rushed into Delilah's arms, the woman crying, "My dear, we're going home, sweetheart." She promised. "I won't let you go anywhere anymore, and I won't leave you. Forgive me." In the end, Delilah's husband, Dominic, and his lover, also known Delilah's sister, Alexis, ended up in prison. Travis felt sorry for Delilah's father and seemed to forgive him, or so it appeared. Delilah didn't tell anyone that she had simply destroyed the envelope with the password to the safety deposit box. Remembering the combination by heart, she kept only her grandfather's note, laminated it, and carried it in her wallet as her most precious treasure. Delilah claimed her collection from the bank, simply went there, asked to open the box, and hid the priceless stamps in a huge sports bag. A whole album filled with stamps from different countries and eras. She brought the album to Nathan. "It's yours, Nathan," she said. "If you sell it, you can change a lot on this farm. Build new barns, hire workers, buy equipment." The elderly man looked at her as if she were crazy. Delilah had almost gotten used to that look. It seemed like almost everyone thought she was mad. But this time Nathan's gaze held genuine admiration. "Listen, girl, I won't take this," he firmly said. "I don't need it. It's yours. But you won't refuse sponsorship, will you?" Delilah smiled. "I won't." Nathan winked. "But on one condition. You become my business partner." Delilah couldn't refuse such an offer. The house was now completely under her control. She continued working on the farm. Angela, the housekeeper, was looking after Polly. She told Delilah that she wanted to go to the police, but Dominic threatened to kill her if Angela tried. Angela searched for Delilah on her own with her friends. They combed through the entire forest, circled the lake, but found nothing. Delilah didn't want to have anything to do with her parents anymore. They betrayed her. She didn't regret losing them. It was just her bad luck. She lost her mother and father before they died. It happens. You just have to endure that pain and move on. Travis didn't remember her for a long time, almost half a year. But one evening he came to her after work. "Delilah," he said quietly, "I have to do something." "Wait." She looked at him. Travis silently took out his phone from his pocket and played music. Frank Sinatra. Tears welled up in Delilah's eyes. She kept silent. and Travis gallantly extended his hand to her. "Shall we dance?" His gaze was misty, as if he were both with her and somewhere far away. There, in the apartment where he once did repairs and where they danced, clinging to each other in desperation at the impossibility of being together. And now they were swirling around the living room. Delilah looked into his eyes, admired his face and thoughtful smile. The same melody, and they were the same. Time had passed, but they hadn't changed. "Delilah," Travis whispered, "how could I forget you?" "But I didn't forget you," she replied with a trembling voice. "Please, Travis, don't disappear again. Promise me." I promise, my love, that I won't disappear."